Time's been moving slowly, so we already in too deep. Can't get no sleep on each other, heavy teasing all day. And when the sun sets, you asking me to come through, kick it with you. Night turn into morning dew. Then you feel it rushing in, lose control. You don't wanna go slow, for sure. We both already know your place is my place now. My place is your place, let's face it. Baby, you know all the places. Places. My place is your place, my place. Your place is my place. Just face it. No one knows my places like you do. Your places like I do. My place like you do. Baby, don't stop. Got the key to the lock, we in our own zone. Make yourself at home, get to know mine on the inside. We can meet at yours next time. And you feel it rushing in, lose control. You don't wanna go slow, for sure. We both already know your place is my place now. My place is your place, let's face it. Baby, you know all the places. Places. My place is your place. Your place is my place. Just face it. No one knows my places like you do. Your places like I do. My place like you do.
I'ma need safety, tell the op can't snake me. Ray gun off safety. My girl so tasty, tell her it's your world. She want the two-tone spaceship. Blow smoke screen daily, so the stress don't faze me. I'm going, I keep it factual. I'm on sabbatical, I'm out in Central America. I need a break from hysteria. Park like the one with the carousel. I get it lit in your area. I'm locked to the vision, it couldn't be clear. You couldn't pay me to care enough. I dare you to hate me supreme with the sound through the stereo. So turn it up loud when you hearing us. We live and it's good in your area. My mama proud, she tearing up and it's going down. Got your girl aroused by these massive stacks like 100 pounds. Running big laps till the sun is down like 100 miles. Tinted frames on me leaning down. I'm winning now. Been a while, you ain't like me then, but how you like me now? Real one, if I hold you down, I'ma keep it there till we in the ground. Jet black when I paint the town. Only blue sheets when they pay me now. Treat a setback like a step back. Wave, I got the game in a vice grip. Way up when the virus clear. All my niggas on the flight list. Verbally gifted, take the plot and I twist it. Got it big lit. Sex with the incense, got my mind rents. Won't stop, I'm relentless. I'ma need safety, tell the op can't snake me. Ray gun off safety. My girl so tasty, tell her it's your world. She want the two-tone spaceship. Blow smoke screen daily, so the stress don't faze me. I'm going, I want a girl for that mouthpiece, so bright that it light on my face. Your shawty just call me a fave, cause she like my character traits. I never stop for a break, I put a lock on the game. I put a stock in my name, but I give a fuck about the fame. I took a bite of that life and it tastes so exquisite. It feel like you do when you look in my pendant. Hopeless romantic, my girl, chin up for the kid. I'm not on no simp shit. Won't stop till the youngest he dreams. Wanna take her from rags to riches. I heard that you claim that you know me, but you ain't the homie. The fuck is your friendship? I need the loyalty, back up the royalty. I give a fuck if you notice me. Ain't nobody holding me. Big wave at your shoreline, so they know it's me. Bay boy from the cold seas. Nitro with a new pen, going ISO. Tell them don't reach. Ice cold with it, no fleece. I'ma need safety, tell the op can't snake me. Ray gun off safety. My girl so tasty, tell her it's your world. She want the two-tone spaceship. blow smoke screen daily, so the stress don't faze me. I'm going, ayy, look, going, yeah, I'm going, crazy, wave, yeah, crazy, yeah, look, going, crazy, wave, ayy, look, going, yeah, I'm going, crazy, wave, yeah, crazy, yeah, look, going, crazy, wave.
The end of the weekend, but I still wanna turn up. Yeah, I still wanna turn up. All I want is to go again, but you ain't picking your phone up. Why you messing my head up? Any night, any day, let me take you away. All I need is just saying yeah. Better nights, better days, when you're here with me, babe. Cause you're all that I crave, so I wonder, where are you? Don't hide away from me when I need you most. We got love guaranteed, and I have to know, say, where are you? Don't be so hard to reach, just pick up your phone. Tell me where you'll be, cause I gotta know. Let me know when you're ready, cause I made reservations. Too many invitations, and the last night was heavy. I need communication. Tell me where's your location. Used to talk 24/7, every other second, just to make sure we were up to date. Now it's closer to 11, and I ain't hearing nothing. I just need to know that you're okay. Where are you? Baby, don't hide away from me when I need you most. We got love guaranteed, and I have to know, say, where are you? Hey, don't be so hard to reach, just pick up your phone. Tell me where you'll be, cause I gotta know. Any night, any day, let me take you away. All I need is you saying yeah. Better nights, better days, when you're here with me, babe. Cause you're all I crave, so I wonder, where are you? Baby, don't hide away from me when I need you most. We got love guaranteed, and I have to know, say, don't be so hard to reach, just pick up your phone. Tell me where you'll be, cause I gotta know. You'll never feel the way I feel. You don't know if my love is real. Baby, listen to me, here's the deal. When you're not here, I'm not the same. I'm needing a new chapter, babe. Been stuck here in a bed for days. I've been staring at the telephone, cause when you're gone, I miss your face. 8 o'clock, body talk, there's no need to bring it up. Nothing you say makes it better. Wrecking ball, tear apart, issues left behind, restart. Nothing you say makes it better. Hey, bring it right back to me, baby. No, we've been here before. Give me the real this time, no cap, no lies. It's our encore. Bring it right back. give you up. I know we've been through way too much, but I'm confident we'll make it through. I'm here for you, you're not by yourself. Later clock, body talk, there's no need to bring it up. Nothing you say makes it better. Wrecking ball, tear apart, issues left behind, restart. Nothing you say makes it better. Bring it right back to me, baby. I know we've been here before. Give me the real this time, no cap, no lies. It's our encore. Bring it right back to me, baby. I know my heart wants more. Give me the good this time, no cap, no lies. It's our encore.
Yo, what up, y'all? It's your boy Rob coming back at you once again with another live stream. So before we get started, you already know what to do. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you hit the bell icon twice. Smash the like button. Share this video out to all of your followers, and let's get it cracking. All right. So shout out to everybody that's in the room. All right. We got Gullah Jack Tracks in the building. Shout out to Gullah Jack Tracks. We got Vovo 2 Love in the building. We got my man Jesse Parrish for Denver Mayor. We got Fantizzy in the house. My man Torian Rain in the building. We got Cameron Jones up here. Shout out to Hey Mr. Knickerbocker, and make sure you guys show some love. Hey Knickerbocker hit your boy with a super chat with a cash app, so show some love. Definitely appreciate it. Hey Mr. Knickerbocker. We got Emmanuel Carey in the house, Carla Lockhart up in here, and TNBN is in the house. All right. So I know you guys saw the thumbnail. All right. And the reason why that thumbnail is on there is because I want to ask you guys a series of questions. All right. Before I ask that series of questions, you like how I threw that in there because I forgot to ask in the beginning. If you guys could let me know if the mic sounds okay, if everything sounds good. If it sounds good, give me a thumbs up or a radiation emoji. If you guys can't hear me, give me an angry face or a thumbs down in the chat so I can fix it. Hopefully everything sounds good. So, and shout out to Lehman Lucas. What's good with it, bro? So if you pay close attention to the conversations when it comes to reparations and, you know, certain political things that we talk about as far as being quote unquote beneficial to us, it seems like a lot of people are opposed to those things, even though those people, for one, haven't had the same experience as us here in the United States, and for two, a lot of those people actually benefit from the same protections that we think that we should have. Would you guys agree? Or would you disagree? Let me know how you guys feel about that. See how accurate that is. All right. Now, what I find fascinating is that anytime we talk about our history, there's two things that people tend to do. The first thing that people do is say that this exact same thing happened to other people. So what are you complaining about? Which isn't a valid rebuttal. Would you guys agree? And look at you guys on the combo. Shout out to you guys for the ×7 combo. You guys are almost at that ×15. Remember, we need the ×15, y'all. It would seem like they use two arguments. The first argument is that it's not that bad. And that the second argument is that it happened to other people, which it does. Neither one of those arguments matter. If we're talking about particular things that occurred that caused damage to us, and if we want to make a big deal out of it, and if we feel that we need repair in order to get those things fixed, then we do. And that's the end of the discussion. Right? We don't need to justify anything to anybody. Nobody justified anything to us. The only problem is that when we bring everything that we have as far as evidence to the table, we're going to be dealing with PSBE. We're going to be dealing with political shame, blame, and explain. Because we can shame these people for how horrible they are. We can blame these people as a result of them being horrible for our conditions. And we can explain exactly how the conditions and them being horrible led to us being in the situation that we're in. We can do that, right? But now, without a way to say you do this or else, what's going to happen? Nothing's going to happen. SBE for the win, as always. And why is SBE for the win? Because the world is correct. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Shatera. What's good with it? Right? So let's dip into the dominant society for a moment. Despite the fact that we're already deeply dipped into the dominant society, let's just dip a little bit further into the psyche. When you listen to how people respond to things, especially politicians like Ron DeSantis, politicians, and ADOSOS around America say, what happened to you people isn't so bad. Would you guys agree? If you guys agree, give me a thumbs up. If you guys disagree, give me a thumbs down. What are you complaining about? What happened to you people isn't so bad. What's going on with you people currently isn't so bad. How many times have you heard that? How many times have you guys heard that? Have you guys heard that at all? If you guys heard that, give me a thumbs up. If you guys didn't hear that, give me a thumbs down. Here's my suggestion to that. If you're saying that it's not so bad, then what you're saying is that it's tolerable for everyone. And that if someone were to do something like that, well, then it wouldn't be looked at as that horrific because, quote unquote, it's not that bad. I mean, everybody should be able to deal with it's not that bad, right? So when I hear people say it's not that bad, what I hear from that is an invitation, a challenge, actually, for me to create the same conditions for those people that have been created for me. Unfortunately, most people don't take that as a challenge. Most people don't even hear that. And honestly, most people don't even care. But I care. And I see it. So now, it clearly, right? Let's just say we take the position of these people, right? We will globally accept. We will globally accept that, quote unquote, what happened to us wasn't so bad. Let's do that. Let's experiment. You guys down for an experiment? If it wasn't so bad, then that means that it's tolerable by everybody and nobody should have a problem with going through it. Nobody. Because it's not that bad. You all have already given us the pass and permission and said that what happened to us wasn't so bad. A paper cut's not that bad. Acne's not that bad either. Some people may say a broken arm isn't that bad. I mean, it's better than a bullet. So the not that bad permission, in my opinion, has been granted. And it's been granted a long time ago. Why people have not taken up that permission to fulfill that mission is beyond me. Actually, it's not beyond me. Again, it's because I call bluff. What we're going to do with this video live streaming on Rumble is we're going to look at the quote unquote slave breeding farms. We're going to talk about them. We're also going to talk about how those same things are still going on today through social engineering, not so much civil engineering, like with the creation of a plantation, but with city blocks and government quote unquote projects. I mean, what kind of project is it that we're doing here? If you ask me, the project is to mass produce a large amount of genetically favorable people to insulate the bottom floor of the capitalist, amoral economy that has created the United States, which is one of the world's biggest economic powers in the world. We're going to have a high value conversation. You guys probably heard us talking about it on React's podcast yesterday. When it comes to quote unquote societal high value men, people who society would look like as high value, I'm going to ask you guys a question. When it comes to the families, the DuPonts, the Rockefellers, those kind of people, when it comes to every single person that has money in the world, how much value did racism add to them? Racism added a lot of value to the value of Europe, didn't it? I mean, when you just steal people's stuff and you steal it because of the color of their skin, because you think you're entitled to it, because you think you're a better human being than them, it doesn't do very well for the people with color in their skin, but it does do something really good for the people without. It increases their perceived value. JP Morgan Chase, the Marlboro Cigarette Company, the Chicago Tribune, the Miami Herald, the New York Times, the New York Post, all of those companies were great companies. Now, let me ask you guys a question. When it comes to how much total lifetime income they've made, what percentage of that income has come as a result of doing quote unquote racist business? Maybe that's one of the reasons why these people are so opposed to woke, because they're trying to encourage us to do quote unquote racist business. Well, my thing is if we're being told to do these things and we have a history of quote unquote doing what we're told and doing it well, then why haven't we done these things? Because we're getting told to do these things every day. We're getting told that what happened to us wasn't that bad. If it's not that bad, then anybody can endure it, and it's perfectly okay. And nobody should look at me funny if I ever get the opportunity to do it, and I do. Right? So if you ask me, everybody's future efforts and concentrations should be on a WS remix that serves us, since it's not that bad. And we clearly must have these people's blessings, because we get told that it's quote unquote not that bad all the time. Go ahead, try it. It's not that bad. You ever had this recipe? I know it doesn't look the best, but go ahead and try it. It won't kill you. It's not that bad. Hashtag it's not that bad. TD and I looked at this, and we're going to look at it here. It's a video article from Breaking Points. California approves $1 million in reparations. Why do you all deserve reparations? That's what these people will say. If they find a justification, well, we can't pay it. I'm going to remove my support at the last minute. You all don't deserve anything. Nobody alive today was a slave. I'm not rich. All of those things, they aren't that bad. So let's listen and see what Breaking Point says. Because I guarantee you, it's not going to be the same thing that we would say.
Let's go to the last part here. Had to throw this in because Emily is here. A resident called there on the screen. A California reparations panel has okayed a state apology and payments.
So I want you guys to make sure that you understand. And I want to make this comparison. And I need some comment section participation. People are upset that white people don't support reparations. I don't know if anybody's been paying attention to the news or not, but white people don't even support oxygen for you. Shout out to Ron DeSantis. Oh, Asian people don't support oxygen for you either. Shout out to my man KO Kid Fit. Vivek Ramaswamy. Derek Chauvin. Let me ask you guys a question. Let's take reparations out of the conversation for a second. How many of these people support oxygen for us? That's the question. So the reason why I ask about the high value conversation, how much wealth has been created through racism? I need some dollar amounts. Would it be safe to say a couple years of the United States GDP in its entirety? That's true, Tori, and many of them don't support daily baths. That's hilarious. That's true, though. So it would be it would be accurate to say that racism tends to increase the probability of high value creation based on a financial and economic basis. Could we say that? If we can say that, give me a thumbs up. If we can't say that, give me a thumbs down. Now, let me ask you guys a question. If that's the case, then why is it that in our households, we're being taught to love everybody and everybody else is being taught tribalism? If you teach somebody about peace all the time, you decreasing the likelihood of those people ever going to war with you, even if you're doing them wrong. Oh, yeah, we love each other. Well, if you love and you teach love all the time and you just keep teaching love, the concept of hate and when it's necessary to hate, they cease to exist. Do they exist now? Why do you think that out of every single group of people, we're the only ones that have ever collectively helped other groups of people? If you're supposed to be stuck at the bottom and you're doing your own lift every raise all tides politics without the Democrats being involved, just doing it as a part of your value system, you're going to constantly stay at the bottom. But that's what a lot of people been taught. Love thy neighbor. Why? Thy neighbor called the cops on me and I got shot because of it. But I'm supposed to love that neighbor. At what point do people's survival instincts wake up? Shout out to Torian Rain for the Sundown Town series. The signs used to say stay out when the sun goes down. Now those same signs in those same places say sold. And you see a happy black family in front of it. Now that's interesting. So we got to ask ourselves these questions so that we truly know what we're dealing with, not so that we have an illusion that makes us feel comfortable, so that we truly know what we're dealing with. The one thing that is always said is that it's not that bad. If it's not that bad, then that means that it's generally acceptable. So if it's generally acceptable, this is something that if people put their mind to it, they could do. So my question for everybody in here is, why hasn't this been done? Let me ask you guys a question. Do you guys know the answers to all of these questions? Let me ask you guys another question. When it comes to getting anything back from this particular system, quote unquote, after it's gotten back, do the rules change? Have you noticed that? If the rules change, give me a thumbs up. If they don't change, give me a thumbs down. Let me know why that is.
Put apology first.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's kind of funny. They say, let's go ahead and get into it here a little bit.
The apology is funny. I just want you guys to make sure that you hear this. The thought of an apology is funny. Why would we apologize to these people who we defeated, for making ourselves and everybody else rich based on you all? Would you guys do that? See, that's the question right there. Would you guys do that? Any of our expectations, we got to ask ourselves, would we do that? And then the thing is the answer is, if your answer is yes, you would do that. My question to you is why? Because nobody has ever done that for you. You know what I mean? Think about that. Do people think on those levels? Let's listen to some more.
California's Reparations Task Force has voted Saturday to approve recommendations on how the state may compensate and apologize to Black residents for generations of harm caused by discriminatory policies. The 9-member committee convened.
Now remember, shout out to the lineage, reparations ain't about race. But notice how the white media keeps making it about race. Any fact checks under this video on breaking points? No. But they're blatantly lying about what's going on with the governmental agency. There's a task force that's recommending a formula to a governmental agency about lineage-based reparations. The news keeps saying that they're about race. Is there a fact check on there like there was for C-19? Is there a fact check on there like there is for C-19? That's my question, guys. Help me out. Somebody answer. Because if not, we got to ask the question, well, shit, why not? right? If not, why not? Why isn't there one? Shout out to John. There should be. It's misinformation, right? Reparations aren't based on race, right? They're based on your lineage tracing back to a plantation or a particular time period in the U.S. Census. They're not based on race, right? So my question is, why do white people keep saying that they're based on race? Here's the opportunity for everybody to all join hands and not make something about race. You know what I'm saying? Interesting. Does anybody notice that? See, like this is that stuff that I'm talking about that people need to be asking these people. Like to me, like if you ask me, like these are some of the questions that people should be asking. Ask these questions on Twitter, like, yo, what's up with this? And real quick, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys haven't smashed that like button, make sure you guys take a moment, smash the like button. Also, if you guys have not hit the bell, make sure you guys hit the bell. And if you guys aren't subscribed over on Rumble, make sure you go to Rumble and subscribe to the channel. Okay. Let's watch a little bit more.
2 years ago has given final approval at this meeting in Oakland to proposals that now go to state lawmakers to consider reparations legislation. Barbara Lee is actually co-sponsoring this bill in Congress to study restitution proposals for African Americans. Reparations are not only morally justifiable, they say, but they have the potential to address long-standing racial disparities. One of the recommendations included here in legislation, Emily, is payments apparently up to $1 million in some cases per resident. Now, I think this is always a hot topic. It's one people feel strongly about, and it's one where I think it really bears scrutiny in terms of not just how do all Americans generally feel about this issue. The is actually quite complicated. One of the better approximation that I try to come to is affirmative action. So affirmative action effectively is like an in-kind, acknowledgement of discrimination and of, it's almost like in-kind reparations. Can we agree on that definition? I think that's fair. Let's go ahead and put this up there.
That's the explicit ambition of its writers.
I agree. And so yet in California, remember this, in 2020.
And shout out to Robb and Carla for answering the Nightbot. Make sure you guys help them out with answering the Nightbot. California Propositions 16 election results, repeal of ban of affirmative action. So I find this interesting. What they're doing here is they're trying to compare a lift all boats, rise all tides legislation that is the most beneficial to white women, which is a proven fact. And for some reason, statistics about this particular thing have something to do with people's opinions about reparations. Oh yeah, Rumble is popping, bro. Rumble is popping. Shout out to my man Jay Bird. What's good with it, bro? So now again, we already saw the news give misinformation about this, right? We've already witnessed that, and now we're making comparisons, and we don't know the reason why these comparisons are being made. They're not anywhere near the same at all.
Time of the so-called Reparations Council was formed. Well, guys, on a voter level, 57% of Californians, some 10 million people, voted against affirmative action. They voted against bringing affirmative action back in college admissions. So I think that this is a great.
Now, here's my question. What do you guys think about that? I don't think anybody really cares about affirmative action in college admissions. Let's get a poll out here. Let's try to get that times 15 with the emojis this time. How many people feel any kind of way about affirmative action? If you care about affirmative action, give me a thumbs up. If you guys don't care about affirmative action, give me a thumbs down or an angry face.
Great approximator of how Californians, some of the most liberal, democratic-minded people in the country, even they don't agree with affirmative action. And there, we're talking about in-kind effective.
So now we got to decode this. When he's talking about, quote-unquote, these liberal-minded people, and even in California, what does he mean by even in California? What is he talking about here? All you got to do is just let these people talk enough, and they'll let themselves hang. Which is one of the reasons why they want to go around hanging everybody else, because they do it to themselves on their own. And they feel everybody should suffer the same fate.
racial, benefits within the state system.
Racial benefits in the same system, like being a white woman. So now here he's talking about racial benefits, right? But here's the thing. Breaking Points is an independent media company, and they have almost 1 million subscribers on YouTube. What people need to understand is that the evidence does not lie. There's not that many people that are, quote unquote, on this side of the tracks that give a shit what goes on from day to day. So my thing is that when we have those kind of comparisons and the gap for concern when compared is that damn deep, we have to be realistic in our expectations. We have to be realistic in our expectations. If we can't give 50%, if we can't get 50% of people to give a shit about where they get their next meal from, what can we really expect? Well, one thing that we got to do is we got to increase that number. We got to change that somehow. But the question is, how do you change it? You would think that it'd be common sense for people to be interested in their life, in their destiny, but clearly it's not. So how do you reprogram a person to make, imagine saying this, their survival a top priority? How do you do that? How do you do that, for one, when those people have been programmed to only listen to you as secondhand information? Because let's keep it a buck. Besides those of us who actually care about this kind of information, how many of us actually treat and utilize Black media like it's primary information? The majority of us probably do, but remember, we're a minority in a minority. So how do we start encouraging people to do that? See, these are things that take a lot of effort. These are things that take a lot of thought. These are things that take think tanks and long-term plans, goals, market research, studies. Very complicated. Doable. You know what I'm saying? Very doable. Not rocket science at all. But is the effort there? Is the desire there? Is the will there? What do you all see? Am I crazy? You guys see the same thing that I see, or do you see something different? Shout out to Catsy. What's good with it, Catsy? You guys see the same thing that I see, or do you see something different? Let me know.
Benefits the state system. Now we're talking about straight up cash. Now, again, whenever it comes to the polling on this issue, it is somewhat complicated. Go ahead and put E3 up there, please, on screen. To the back.
Now, here's my question. How many people are out here attacking our political objectives? I want you guys to name people in the comment section that are attacking our political objectives. If no names come in the comment section, then I'll just act like nobody's attacking our political objectives and just go on like that for the rest of my YouTube career. Now, my question is, why are we not attacking anything? Why are we not attacking anything? And if we are attacking something, what are we attacking? We're being attacked. What is our response to those attacks? That's my question for everybody. What's the response? What's going on? Is anybody doing anything? Is anything happening? What's the response for all of this? People are attacking from all over the place, like Dr. Claude Anderson said. Dr. Claude Anderson said this a long time ago. So people should have been, thinking through and preparing through a response and a defense, right? So we know that we do our due diligence at all times and that we did that. So since we do that and we're so dependable, my question is, what is the strategy called and how does it work? Do we ever compare metrics? That wouldn't be a bad idea. Shout out to my man Jesse. Jesse says we need someone running for political office on a B1 agenda. I think we actually need I think we actually need an actual office. You know what I'm saying?
Best of our ability whenever it comes to the view of reparations and all that. Some 77% of Black Americans, compared with 18% of white Americans, do support reparations, specifically for the descendants of enslaved.
18% of white Americans. What that means is that 72? No, that's 82. 82% don't support it. %82 of white people don't support it. Now, if 77% is a pretty heavy weighted average on the population number, how's that going to turn out for votes? Right. Exactly, Torian. And now, see, here's the thing, Deneen. They don't have to. They don't have to. See, and right, and I'm so glad that you said this. This is what we got to understand. Any type of comparative, that's SBE. We're shaming them for not being fair. We're blaming them for us not getting what we need. And we're explaining to them why that shame and why that blame has led to the outcome that it's led to. Without a way of enforcing the fairness, without a way of enforcing that we are getting what we're supposed to get, which if we were actually in the place where we had power, enforcing would just be us enforcing our will. It's not going to happen. So we need other ways. Let me ask you guys a question. Can you guys name me a situation where you haven't been outraged and where everything has been done fair according to how you would expect it to be done? Can you guys name me a situation like that? A trial, a government policy? Name me a situation like that. A situation where everything went right. Can anybody give me a situation where every single thing went right? There's more situations that we can track and count, right? And they've all went wrong. Despite the fact that these situations all go wrong all the time. Well, this person should have gotten more jail time because they killed this person. They were unarmed. This person only got 2 years and they murdered somebody in cold blood. This person murdered somebody in cold blood that didn't even do anything, and he's not even a police officer. What's the batting average for any home runs for us? I'll give you a hint. There's a 0 on the top. So the question that I'm asking then is, we have a repeated pattern of, shout out to Val. What's good with it, Val? We have a repeated pattern of nothing ever being granted or negotiated favorably for us through politics. And real quick, ladies and gentlemen, we got 43 people watching. Shout out to all 43 people who are watching. If you guys haven't smashed that like button, take a moment. Make sure you guys smash that like button. Also, if you guys haven't hit the bell, make sure you guys hit the bell icon. And please share the video to your social media. Right. Now, here's my question, Deneen. Is that what we're supposed to get? My question is, what else would we get? I want to ask this question to everybody in the comment section. Deneen, what Deneen said here is, we get constant reinforcement of our quote unquote worthless and bottom caste status. Let me ask you guys a question. Is that what we're supposed to get? Is that what we're supposed to get? Lloyd Sky 9 says no. If you guys agree with Lloyd Sky 9, give me a thumbs up. If you guys disagree, give me a thumbs down. You guys are scared today. It's okay. I swear to God, I don't bite. Never believe somebody that says they swear to God that doesn't believe in God. So if that's been the pattern, right? Shout out to you guys for the ×3 combo. If that's been the pattern, we're still doing the same thing, and the pattern has shown no change. We're not getting political objectives accomplished. Now, Deneen, I'm going to go back to what Deneen has said here because this was good. Deneen said we get constant reinforcement of our worthless and bottom caste status. Now, I asked, is that what we should be getting? Lloyd Sky 9 said, no, that's not what we should be getting. Jesse says yes, as prisoners of war, according to the code. I agree with Jesse. And I think that's the first layer of where people are not really understanding what's going on. Everything that happens to us is exactly what's supposed to happen in the conditions that we're living in. If we actually believe what we say, everything is how it should be according to schedule. That's what Neely Fuller Jr. said. And I agree with that. Because we don't live in a free world. There's only one group of people that lives in a free world. Nobody else does. So my question is, why would you expect, when you're not in a free world, the people that determine the freedoms of the world to do anything for you other than manipulation that's beneficial for them? Why would anybody expect that? So my thing is, if you compare what's being done for us or to us to some other group, is that a waste of time? Is that productive? If you ask me, it's a waste of time and it's not productive, because we should know where we are. We should know our environment. Our environment is hostile. This is evidence that people don't know our environment. Our environment is to be in a position of weakness where something is harming us at all times. Effectively, actual hell. Which is one of the reasons why people came up with the term WD. I don't want to say it on YouTube because I might get my shit demonetized. But when I'm talking about WD, it don't have a 40 at the end. It's what Malcolm X used to always say, because they've created a hell. Not because any mysticism and nonsensical Bible bumping nonsense. Is because figuratively, if that's where the alleged devil dwells, that's a good place for him and a horrible place for those souls that are suffering. Well, when you live here in the United States, whose souls are suffering? So now the question is why do people want to remain in purgatory and they're not even Catholic? Just Note says you have to first realize who is running everything. Here's my question. How is there anybody alive that doesn't realize who runs everything? And honestly, I think there's more to it than just the people that run everything. There's other component parts. Most people think that they know who runs everything. So how come they still run everything? You know what I mean? So just keep that in mind. Let that idea marinate. Let that idea marinate.
People. All of U.S. adults, though, the answer comes to no, 68%, and yes at 30%. For white Americans, it's 80, and then 18 for yes. Black Americans, it's 17 no, 77 yes. Hispanic Americans, 58, 39. Asian Americans, 65 no, 33. Amongst age groups, it's actually, unsurprisingly, kind of split up. 52, 45 for ages 18 to 29, the majority, but slight majority saying no, who are younger. 30 to 49, 63 to 34, 74, 24, 81, and 18. Now, in terms of the general polling here, there's some changes when it comes to income, which I find kind of interesting. So if you ask lower income Americans, the slight majority are still against, 54.
Right. So you're talking about sombreritos. Yeah, sombreritos are them folks, just like them other folks, which is why they didn't deal with us folks. As far as I'm concerned, that whole sombrerito thing, you're just as bad as a wasp. Anytime, and I'm not, don't think that I'm trying to front on you, Just Know, because I'm not. So I hope you don't take this way. But when people start talking like that, you can tell they've been hanging around with some with some like Joe Rogan type cats with that bullshit. Because I'm going to tell you something. It didn't benefit beef. I want everybody to understand this, right? It didn't benefit anybody to separate sombreritos from other of them folks while racism was legal, while slavery was legal, while Jim Crow was legal. That was not important. Now, for whatever reason, it is important, right? Because those plantation owners and a lot of those Irish and native indigenous people, they could have easily threw those people under the bus back then, but they chose not to. And since they chose not to, they chose what side that they were on. And people should never forget that, which means that you should always look at them all at the exact same way. You know what I'm saying? I don't have any kind of common enemy with any WS. I can't have a common enemy with somebody that's my target. And honestly, if you ask me, I think that most people should make an effort to not try to find anything in common with them, other than any kind of methods that they've ever historically done on us to be, reciprocated. That's it. Because remember, it's not that bad. So as long as it's not that bad, we have their blessing. It's not that bad. We don't have to worry about it. We don't have to worry about the contents or anything. You know what I'm saying? See, that's that part that people need to start getting right there. You know what I'm saying?
Or versus 42. Middle income Americans, it's 74 and 24. And upper income Americans more kind of on board with reparations, middle and upper middle class Americans generally against it. So I think it's important to put in the context of, in general, this is a quote unquote divisive policy on the merits, just whenever you look at it. In terms of California itself, they have already rejected and voted against this effective type of policy. So then the question.
This is already divisive policy. That's what this guy says. Now, you know what's interesting? You need to scale this back a little bit. Do you notice that nothing that anybody else ever proposes or needs is divisive policy? Nothing. Literal nothing. If you notice that, give me a thumbs up. If you guys don't notice that, give me a thumbs down. Let me ask you guys a question. When is the last time you've heard something that's been needed by non-black groups classified as quote unquote divisive policy? When is the last time that you've heard that? Have you ever heard it? If you guys can recall when you've heard it, let me know what policy it was that you heard it for. Well, this is divisive policy. This is divisive policy, and this policy is divisive, but it's based on your history and things that actually happened to you, including things that happened to your parents and grandparents. But remember, these are the same people now that advocate against oxygen for you. My question that's very frustrating to me is why are people surprised? See, that like that, I need to get to the bottom of that. And I can't get to the bottom of that without people telling me why they're surprised. So I need people to tell me why they're surprised. You know what I'm saying? And if you can't tell me why you're surprised, then you can at least hit the like button.
Is that it's solving the problem that we want to solve.
Right.
And the problem we want to solve is that we have had racial discrimination in this.
Is this solving the problem that we wanted to solve? See, a lot of people just let that slide. See that right there? A lot of people just let that part slide right there. Well, let's ask him. What problem do you want to solve? Nobody sees a problem with that? He said, well, let's see how this solves a problem that we want to solve. It's not you all's problem to solve. It's our problem, and we already gave you the solution and the answer for it. You don't define what our problem is. So it doesn't matter what problem you want to solve is, because the problem that you want to solve may not be the same as the problem that we need to solve. He feels included in the problem that, well, this guy right here, you know what I'm saying? You see what he is. Well, this is the problem that me and white people want to solve. Okay, bet. And what we want to solve is, we want to solve things our way. And, our way, and, with our way of solving things, you'll just have to give up a little bit because we're bullies. What I need to understand a disconnect of why people think that there's going to be any kind of fair play here. I really need to understand that. I really need people to help me with that. Deneen Grant says, we need to solve the racial wealth gap. I agree. See, and when we say we need to solve the racial wealth gap, that means that we need to solve it. We need to solve it. I think there's been plenty of patterns established to show that we're the only ones that have a vested interest in it. We're the only ones that feel it needs to be addressed. And if any efforts took place to ever address it, it'd be obvious that we're the ones that are going to have to do it because nobody else is going to, and nobody else justifies it. If you guys agree, give me a thumbs up. If you guys disagree, give me a thumbs down. I hear what you're saying, Jesse, as far as Psalms 83:3, but the Bible is not factual information for me. Now, if you're a believer, you know what I'm saying? Like, I respect you being a believer and stuff like that. That's not valid information for me. You know what I'm saying? But I'm sure there's people that can relate with the quote. I'm just putting that out there just to let you know. You know what I'm saying? So now we talk about the racial wealth gap. If we go to them with the racial wealth gap and say, look, and this is a result of slavery, HR 40 is shame, blame, and explain. If we provide our history and talk about the damages that's been done, that they need to rectify because they should be ashamed of what they've done, shame, blame, and explain. They're not going to do it. How are we going to enforce it? See, that's the question. Oh, okay. Well, are you at any kind of religion, Jesse? Because I'm not any kind of religion. So, but this is my question, though. How are we going to force it? Any of the shame, blame, and explain that we can present to any of these people, how are we going to enforce it? SBE, facts. Oh, okay. That's what's up. That's what's up, bro. Get the bullshit Biden told those so-called black leaders. If look, we've seen live action shame, blame, and explain with Jim Clyburn. Jim Clyburn's going to do whatever he wants to. And how are we? And we demonstrated last election that if a grassroots politician comes forward at this point in history, Jim Clyburn is still going to stay in. All of that's already been proven. So Clyburn is outside of consequences from us. How many times have you guys seen people have their cameras out and go shame, blame, SBE, Clyburn at a barbecue, and Clyburn start cussing at him and shit, and we still don't have reparations? That right there, that's the result of SBE. You go up to somebody with a camera, SBE them, and you still ain't got shit that you asked for. Because the whole key component is we don't have any way to enforce the consequences. And I do not believe that people are interested enough in creating methods to enforce the consequences. And since that's the case, and that's not a high priority, we are going to continue to not get anything. Val, and see, this is what I'm saying, Val. Val says the issue is that they are not ashamed of what they have done. The system is working the way they intended it to. Facts, but I don't even think the issue of their shame needs to matter, because if we say they're not ashamed, that's expecting them to have the same set of values as us, which they clearly do. So as SBE, you know what I'm saying? KLK Fit said SBE might need to turn to beat motherfucker. Yeah, it might be onto something. You know what I'm saying? Do something at least. Shit. You know what I'm saying? We can't expect that. And if we do expect that, how are we going to enforce it to meet our expectations? We're not, because we can't. So now the thing is that's interesting is that because that's the situation that we're in, you would think that people would be more interested in figuring out ways to deal with those consequences so that we can SBE with consequence at the least. I'll tell you, the some burritos are the OG SBEers that get pizzade off of it. But it's because they do things different. There's not even really an interest to do commerce amongst each other. Like I said, I got some friends at my other job, and there's some Asian people, you know what I'm saying? And I mean, like, they do business with each other, like even within their own household. Val Williams says, I'm sorry, what is SBE? It's shame, blame, and explain. And I agree with that shit. It's too much SBE going on out here. And it's not helping with anything. It's not helping men transform women back into traditional women, and it ain't helping anybody with shit with politics.
Is the living racial discrimination through economic inequities that have manifested is to have direct cash payments of some X sum to
Go look up what sombrerito means in Spanish. So now what we have here is this million subscriber, close to million subscriber platform on YouTube, basically saying whatever misinformation that he wants about reparations, and YouTube is not putting a correction window in there to correct it. You guys notice that? Shout out to my man Jared. What's good with it, bro? You guys notice that? See, you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of times, you know what I'm saying? Like I be talking about some crazy ass shit, and like people don't feel that it's that damn important. You know what I'm saying? Hey, you know what I'm saying? So like the way that I get down, you know what I'm saying, is that, you know, when I be talking about some shit, if it's not that important, like the video will be up, but when this shit come back to bite, I'm not really gonna give a shit about it. You know what I'm saying? So real quick, y'all, hold on real quick. Make sure you guys, if you guys haven't, take a moment, go over there to Rumble and subscribe to my channel on Rumble. That's imperative. People YouTube channels be disappearing, and then people be like, oh, I can't find this motherfucker. Well, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. You know what I'm saying? I see that shit happen all the time. People lose their channels. People that I be watching lose their channels. Well, I couldn't find you and shit. Well, you couldn't find me because, you know what I'm saying? Like, you didn't follow the instructions. That shit happened with Professor Black Truth. He had to post a damn community post about that shit. Motherfuckers don't be listening to a goddamn thing. Man, he was off YouTube for, I forget for what, but he was like, I'll be posting my videos on Vimeo. I think it was on Vimeo or something like that. Motherfuckers was posting like, you ain't posted a moment of truth in about 2 weeks. It's like, you got the patience of Job and shit. You know what I'm saying? There go your Bible verse.
To specifically Black Americans with a acknowledgement that what has happened there is obviously a moral crime.
Specifically Black Americans, especially what happened there is especially a moral crime. What happened where? And what Black Americans are you talking about? KOK Fit said they won't even let him community post. They got you good, bro. They got you good. Specifically Black Americans. No, that's not specifically. It's not specifically Black Americans. But again, I want you guys to pay very close attention to what misinformation it is that YouTube allows. I'm going to ask everybody in the comment section a question, and if nobody answers this question, I'm just assuming that you guys feel that I'm wrong for asking this. Is what this guy here is saying misinformation? If this is misinformation, give me a thumbs up. If it's not misinformation, give me a thumbs down.
X sum to specifically Black Americans with a acknowledgement that what has happened there is obviously it must be rectified. However,
what happened? What happened where?
And this is my kind of view of this. I wish Crystal was here.
What happened where? It was what was a moral crime? What are you talking about? What happened in the United States that happened to all Black Americans except racism? Slavery didn't happen to all Black Americans in the United States. So again, I want you guys to pay very close attention to how these people will sit there and tell you how to take race out of it, but when it's convenient for them, they want to put race in it. See, like I'm not trying to show people what to do or how to do what or how to be what or what to think or who to think or any of that. What I'm trying to show is like, man, pay attention to how stupid these people are. Shout out to everybody for hitting that time 7. Y'all almost there. Do y'all see that? But then I want you guys to pay exactly. This is what I'm talking about right here. This is what I'm talking about. Carlton Way said, where are the fact checkers? That's the question. I want y'all to know. I want y'all to show me and tell me where the fact checkers is at. Because you know those people ain't going to listen to Tariq Nasheed. Tariq Nasheed went on Fox News and Tucker Carlson didn't even let him talk. And Tucker Carlson was like, well, I've seen your racist podcast. I remember one time Tariq did a podcast where he was like, you know, these people trying to force this agenda on us, and this is information that can be used by everybody. Where the white people at? I remember that. He did a live stream like that. But Tucker Carlson ain't gonna say that because it don't fit his narrative. But when you can just sit there and lie in front of a million people that you didn't earn, you just got that privilege. You know what I'm saying? So now they're spreading misinformation and YouTube is facilitating the spread of misinformation. This is misinformation about a government issue, right? We seen what they do when they spread alleged misinformation about a government issue. You guys remember when people was spreading alleged misinformation about the 2016 election? You guys remember that? So now what we're doing is we're lying about a government proceeding here. No fact check. How many signatures is that petition about this up to on YouTube? Anybody know? Anybody anybody got the number? If anybody knows the number of YouTube, please enforce misinformation about Black history. If anybody knows what the number of signatures is up to on that petition, drop the number in the comment section for me.
Here, I'd like to hear also what she had to say. But
we need more white people in this conversation.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, though, that's what it gets to is at the end of the day, we're talking about tax. We are talking about a small Democrat.
We need more white people in this conversation. Okay, according to the Asian guy, well, we need more taxpayers. So what they're saying is that white people is equivalent to taxpayer, which is funny as hell because every time I get my paycheck from work, I swear it literally says on there tax, state, local, federal, municipality. I'm pretty sure those lines are itemized on my paycheck, but for some reason, the liberals on Breaking Points think that only white people pay taxes in the United States. Hey, listen, man, I'm all for my tax dollars going for reparations, for cash reparations for foundational Black Americans. And as you guys know, I'm multicultural. So I don't care what that has to do with me. You know what I'm saying? I'm about my tax dollars that go out of my paycheck contributing to reparations for foundational Black Americans. My dad is a full foundational Black American, and he went through Jim Crow, and so did my grandfather on both sides of my family. You know what I'm saying? But what you guys need to hear from these people here is that, oh, we need more white people in the conversation, which is interesting because this is literally about damages that happened to Black people. Nobody ever needed more white people in the conversation when it came to AAPI hate crimes. And actually, white people had a place in that conversation because it was them that was committing 70% of them. Yeah, go ahead. You really do need some white people in that conversation because they out here harming y'all. Go get them. Ask them to stop. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. What's funny is this taxpayer morality, like I like to call it, it's not applied in any other situation. I mean, they just decided to pay the money for Ukraine. No study. No taxpayer moral tests, which is going to do it. So now look what I'm doing, right? Shame, blame, and explain. I'm shaming them for not treating us equally. What am I going to do to grant myself a guaranteed consequence? Well, the only thing that I'm doing, the only thing that I can do, trying to bring awareness to it. That's not going to give me any kind of consequence, but it's the best that I can do. Shout out to my man KO Kid Fit. KO Kid Fit said it's weird how Indian guy toots up for white people when they took over their whole country at one point. Yeah, and created the caste system. The reason why is because everybody understands the capital money market of racism. And one of the ways that we've been kept into the bottom floor is everybody in their respective country. And that, why do you think, listen, why do you think they're bringing over so many immigrants? They're bringing over immigrants because of their natural tribalism and cohesiveness with each other, which will automatically be translated here because they know who runs this country. So by their own culture, they're going to show them respect, and they know who this country hates. So they're going to have animosity towards us. So they're naturally operating in what we would consider a quote unquote racist way. But we do a lot of things backwards, right? And so we're taught to not be racist, which is one of the reasons why the Democrats latch onto and attack everything that we have and try to force tolerance on us. You know, you're not about to get an old school, maybe first generation Asian family and try to force some kind of crazy idea that could resolve in somebody getting monkeypox on them. You're not going to do that to them because they're going to look at you like you crazy. Now here go my question, Jesse. No, I got a question, and this is the question. Don't think that I'm well, I because I just be I am trolling because I do troll. You know what I'm saying? So I do be trolling people. So I'm 50-50. I'm 50% trolling you, and I'm actually 50% legitimately curious. You said that you're not religious or you don't believe in any religion, right? So now my question is, if you're not religious and you don't believe in any religion, what significance does that Psalm verse have to you? Because if you don't believe in religion, I'm sure you don't really believe in the likelihood of any events that come from any holy books. But that particular verse is significant. Is it because it sounds good? Because it does sound good. I'm not going to front. You know what I'm saying? That's basically what it says on the thumbnail in not so many words. You know what I'm saying? Cameron says the Bible is not a reference book. I agree. It's just a book. If one can even say that, because it's arguable that there's consistent fluid chronology. You know what I'm saying? Oh, okay. So you okay, you believe in that. Okay. All right. Now I feel, and like I said, I'm respectful to people's beliefs. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, I don't believe in no religion, including that. You know what I'm saying? But no disrespect, though. I don't want you to feel disrespected. You know what I'm saying?
Right, a problem. So we all do kind of get a say as to how we want to address rights and wrongs that are all been done in our name. And the way that I've always looked at it is this. If you look at the lower income Americans that I reference, they disproportionately include Hispanic, Black, and lower middle class and lower class white Americans. The wage gap between lower income white, Hispanic, and Black Americans is effectively marginal.
Mhm.
So why are we looking at lower end Americans? I can tell you why we're looking at lower end Americans. For one, because the math problem is very easy. There's no Black billionaires, which takes the weighted average of the world wealth way down, which really focuses in on that racial wealth gap, despite the fact that everybody say because LeBron James is a millionaire, we all are a millionaire, which is interesting how that works, because when it comes to white people, Elon Musk is a billionaire. But when some white people say that they weren't born with a silver spoon in their mouth, it's supposed to be a legitimate argument. Just know you say that it's not a religion. To me, like I don't believe that. I don't. I like for me, it's a religion. You know what I'm saying? It's based on what would be defined as a religion, coming from the Abrahamic tree. And not only do I not believe in any religions at all, I don't believe in any religion from the Abrahamic tree. I don't believe that anything in the Bible is true, factual, or has any relevance. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, if you're talking about geographical, like if you're talking about a region, you know what I'm saying? Like some people believe that the quote unquote historical Hebrew place, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, from history. Okay, I feel what you're saying. Some people believe that it was in the Ethiopia region, and that was different. The world was divided up a little bit different back then. You know what I'm saying? So I get that. I feel that. And from what I understand, like as far as from a historical standpoint, a lot of the historical standpoint stuff and geography is actually extremely accurate. So I definitely get that coming from there. You know what I'm saying? So now my question is, why aren't we attacking anybody else's political objectives like this, the way that ours are being attacked? See, because that's the question that I'm always going to ask. Anytime people start saying about the stuff that people do to us, oh, they did this and it's so terrible. Well, remember, if those people are, anytime somebody does something to you, they're opening up a door to you that says, hey, you're invited to do that exact same thing to me. I can take it because I did it to you. So the question that I always have to ask is, why isn't that ever taken advantage of? We've already shown all of the evidence and justified how racism has created lots of the world's wealth, which is one of the reasons why lots of the world's wealth is concentrated within one race, because racism contributed to it. It contributed to that value. And everybody says that it's okay. As a matter of fact, everybody says that it's okay to the point where white people say if you're not racist, then you're woke. Isn't that right? Isn't that correct? White people say that if you're not racist, then you're woke. Being racist is part of your free speech, First Amendment rights. That's what they say all the time, right? If that's what they say, give me a thumbs up. If it's not what they say, give me a thumbs down. So my question is, since these permissions have been put out on the table, my question is that why don't we take them? We're looking for permissions for other things, but permissions to be brutal have been put out. And we can get the other things that we need through being brutal. Shout out to JRS1. What's good with it, bro? So that's my question. Why are we not doing that? Instead, we're doing SBE. What I find funny is that people make fun of SBE and then use more SBE while making fun of SBE. You know what I'm saying? Like, people will make fun of somebody SBE and like acting like a coon while SBEing for other shit. Like, I don't understand that shit. So help me out with that, y'all. Help your boy out.
So I would posit then that if you want to address racial inequity, one of the best things that you can do is just simply help all poor people. Because what
we're not addressing racial equity. We don't need to address all poor people. All poor people weren't damaged as a result of slavery, anti-black racism, and Jim Crow. Like, this is very simple. Very simple. I mean, here's what you do, right? Like, everybody has a head. So I mean, like, let's just deal with headaches and just make sure that everybody just gets some Tylenol. Even the people that don't have a headache. I mean, this is very simple. Remember, these are one of the people that white people say have the highest IQ. This is what they compare IQs to. And we're dealing with this kind of logic. Now, remember, I didn't come up with the IQ book. This is me quoting white people. And when I say quoting white people, I can actually absolutely say quoting white people, because white people always cite the bell curve when talking about crime statistics and bringing up Chicago. So remember, this is white science. So it will be quoted as white science, accepted white science, because it's also perpetuated on all of their favorite news networks, and nobody attempts to refute it or correct them. So it will definitely be stated as that. You know what I'm saying?
Will happen is that you will both increase the livelihood, the opportunity, and the disparity of past wrongs that were done, yes, specifically only to Black Americans, but you will also, at the same time, help lower middle class, lower income Hispanic and white Americans. And
why? They're not lower income as a result of any damages from Jim Crow, slavery, or black codes. That's just like, well, you know, listen, you know, if you happen to die, right? Like, if you happen to eat some food and you got food poisoning and died, well, you know, what we're going to do is we'll just give everybody, you know, $1 million that ate some food, just to mitigate the chances of, if they got food poisoning, well, we'll already have given them $1 million. Do you guys see that? Shame, blame, and explain. What you should be getting out of this message is, well, what we're gonna have here is that these people don't support what we think would make the situation right in a peaceful way as far as reparations. But what these people do support is they do facilitate and support us doing to them what they've done to us. That's what they encourage us to do. So then what we should do is what we're being encouraged to do. In most cases, when the cheerleaders say to win the game, most people don't try to lose the game. Most people try to win the game. So when these people are cheering on and saying that it's not that bad and it happened to everybody and you need to not complain about it, that's giving us our invitation to do it. Like Gus Fring said, do it. So now my question is, why doesn't anybody do it? And real quick, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys haven't smashed the like button, make sure you guys smash the like button. Also, if you guys haven't hit the bell, make sure you guys hit the bell. And please take a moment and make sure that you guys share the stream to your subscribers.
Instead of pitting said groups against each other, you actually end up helping everybody. Now, of course, this is easier said than done. It involves possibly
helping everybody is still hurting us. There's what's called the distributive property of multiplication. So there's a whole bunch of numbers inside the parentheses, and it's like 1 + 2 + 3 + 4. And then on the outside of the parentheses is a number. That number gets distributed to each number inside the parentheses, which basically just increases the interior of the parentheses at a proportion of what was on the outside. That's literally the same thing that these lift all, tide, rise all ship policies do. And these people know this. What they're doing is effectively distributing zero. What if I told you, hey, I'm going to give you $100,000? The only problem is that I'm going to give everybody else $100,000. That $100,000 just turned into zero. That's literally how it works in math class. So now, do you think that that's an accident, or do you think that these people just aren't competent in math class? Which one is it? Probably a little bit of both.
Minimum wage increases. Maybe it involves cash transfers. Maybe it involves tax credits. A variety of myriad different ways.
So how do minimum wage increases compensate the damages of Jim Crow, slavery, and black codes to black people who don't make minimum wage? Foundational black Americans and American descendants of slaves. How does that work? And he's allowed to state this with no pushback. Not only state this with no pushback, state this with no pushback to close to 1 million subscribers. But because this isn't stuff that's important to us, and a lot of us really don't want to be bothered with the hassle of intellectually confronting a lot of these people, we won't give any attention to this kind of information. Which means that people are making their bed. You know what I'm saying? I saw somebody wrote a comment. I think it was Vovo2 Love. Shout out to Vovo2 Love on TD Hip Hop Media's video. He said, man, that mayor ceremony in Chicago sounded like a funeral. Well, it sounded like a funeral because it is a funeral. Like it's the funeral for the death of Black America in Chicago. It is a funeral. You know what I'm saying? And people buried themselves.
We could go about this. But that's kind of the framework where I'm coming at it from. Yeah. And I would say also that the framework that I'm coming at it from is dramatically more politically popular. And why does political popularity matter? Because we live in a democracy. We don't live in a unilateral dictatorship.
And that's why world domination is the only solution. And embracing villainy to get there is the only method. Because when the good guys are considered good guys for harming you, unless you decide to embrace villainy, I don't know how people plan on dealing with that. Let me ask you guys a question. How popular is embracing villainy? If you ask me, it's not very popular. And the reason is because people are all smoke and no fire. And the thing is that's fine. It doesn't have to be popular. Like I say, I come on YouTube and I talk about interesting ideas. That's the premise of my YouTube channel. That's what's in my description box. I come to YouTube and we talk about interesting ideas. That's what we do over here. What that basically tells you is that there's a very large majority of people that do not feel that this is an interesting idea. Shout out to Vovo. Vovo said, I sent you an email about the CBS special from the 70s. It's about the projects. Okay, cool. I'm going to have to check it out. The villain is absolutely always the most important character. So now I ask these questions, and a lot of times you guys don't answer my questions, and I really need you guys to start answering my questions. Why do people operate in a baseline fashion that's harmful to them knowingly, and then double down on it in the things that they say? Why does that happen? That's the first question.
I'm curious what you think.
You know, I think two things are absolutely true, and they can be true at the same time. One, that generational wealth disparities are very real and are very directly and obviously the result of explicit white supremacist discrimination policies that were baked into our constitutional system for far too long. On the other hand, I think it's
like what? Because the Constitution itself was a discriminatory white supremacist policy. So, like what? Shame, blame, and explain. Now, let me ask you guys a question. How many people would rather take this into their own hands and deal with it? And when I say take this into their own hands, nobody's talking about anything violent. Nobody's talking about a mutiny. Nobody's talking about going into the streets. Shout out to Black Loki. You guys see what Black Loki said? He said, "Hey, for the survey, you should have scroll section." I was scrolling and saw that this was live. Are you a new subscriber, Black Loki, or have you been around for a while? Have you hit the notification bell, or what's going on with you? And if you guys haven't done that survey, make sure you guys take a moment and do the survey. And let's just do one real quick. If you guys got a notification, give me a thumbs up. If you guys didn't, give me a thumbs down.
Also true that there's no way to mete out a reparations policy with a semblance of justice, because at the end of the day, proving this is going to be extremely difficult.
So there you go. These lazy people that say that we're so lazy are not willing to do something because of the level of difficulty. Everybody drop some radiation emoji for Black Loki. Black Loki just subscribed. Make sure you guys smash that like button. Share the video out. Also, you must have got it picked up on your algorithm. So so I got my one subscriber to the day. Shout out to my one subscriber that I got for the day.
Because at the end of the day, proving this is going to be extremely difficult in a country where everyone is so mixed and has been mixed for years and years and years and years.
Everyone is so mixed. What does that mean? So being apparently being mixed is an issue. I want you guys to make sure you guys hear this. Are you guys hearing this properly? Let me shut up. What does mixed people's existence have to do with the damages that slavery caused to foundational Black Americans? Can somebody explain that to me? Can somebody explain that to me? Do that make sense? I want you guys to hear. I'm telling you, we're going to have a huge archive of all of these arguments. And see, look, this is what the algorithm does. I want you guys to let me know if you guys have dealt with this. Most of the time, they try showing me white supremacist stuff. I notice that if I say I don't recommend every time I see something I don't like, they show me more Black-centric videos. So, I mean, like, that's what they're doing on the algorithm. You know what I'm saying? You go to YouTube and they doing that on the algorithm. You go to you go to Rumble, they over there actively burning crosses and hanging people. You know what I'm saying? But make sure you go to Rumble anyway. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you guys subscribe over on Rumble if you're not subscribed.
way to mete out a reparations policy with a semblance of justice, because at the end of the day, proving this is going to be extremely difficult in a country where everyone is so mixed and has been mixed for years and years and years and years. So what
So now here's my question. What's you guys answer to that? This individual right here says that now the issue is that just people have been mixed, and people have been mixed for years and years. Well, let's talk about how people got mixed. There's a couple different ways that people got mixed. I think we should talk about them. What do you guys think? I think that's something that we should talk about.
Justifies why one person, there are people who are, we're getting into like the grossness, the just absolutely repulsive, one drop, disgusting type racial science at a certain point, because what justifies somebody who is completely.
Okay, so then that means that there's not a mixed problem then. We got the one drop issue because that's what was going on back there. Like, what, you know what I'm saying? So there's you just took care of your own argument. There is no one drop problem, and the one drop problem that you're talking about is a problem that was created by the people who perpetuated and created racism. That's not our problem. That doesn't have anything to do with us except for how it affected us. Would you guys agree? If you guys agree with that, give me a thumbs up. If you guys disagree, give me a thumbs down.
White, probably looks like me, who's able to trace their ancestry back to slavery. And that's what California does directly redlining in this proposal that you get X number of money.
Yeah, that's called an ADOSO. And anybody that can trace their roots back to a plantation, including white people, something that needs to happen. Yeah, exactly, Cameron. Ask her where light-skinned people came from. Because it wasn't until recently that there was really just legal biracial people walking around out here, because somebody would have been in a lot of trouble if that was going on back then. So like that's one of the reasons why so many of the such a large amount of the mixed people that we see are young, like really young. It's because that's a recent phenomenon of people being allowed to do that. The only other people who were mixed were the people who were the results of breeding farms. I agree with Jesse Note. Not Jesse Note. Now you're talking about language. If you guys agree with Jesse Note, give me a thumbs up. If you guys disagree, give me a thumbs down. But still, even if you ask me, political party, I agree with you that we need to create our own political party. But even doing that is still working within the confines of what they created. This is nonsense. And see that, and this is the problem right here. You know what I'm saying? I'm dead serious. Like this is the problem right here, right? And like I said, see, like here go my thing, right? You guys already know. All right. So how many people knew which was the name of that case? Oh yeah, Loving versus Virginia. All right. So there was this case, Loving versus Virginia. All right. And I think it was a white guy and he wanted to marry a black woman. And I don't know what happened. There was some legislation, court cases, and it ended up they were allowed to get married. You know what I'm saying? Congratulations. I hope they had a good life. Right. Now, how many people were aware that LGBTQ people have been allowed to get married in some states as a result of Supreme Court proceedings that were based on Loving versus Virginia? Now, the interesting thing about this particular situation is that once they passed that legislation, Elizabeth Warren advocated for them to get massive tax rebate reparations. How many people were aware of that? If you guys were aware of that, give me a thumbs up. If you guys weren't aware of that, give me a thumbs down. They got reparations. What'd you get reparations for? Oh, we got reparations because we weren't allowed to same-sex marry. What does you same-sex marrying have to do with loving versus West Virginia? What does a same-sex marriage have to do with a white man and a black woman getting married? A white man and a black woman is a heterosexual union that can do whatever the hell they want to do. That shit's totally legal. That shit's totally normal biologically. How does that have anything to do with that? Regardless the case, right? One case was enough to give people reparations. The other one did not. You know what I'm saying? Now, how does that work? It's because they just give money to whoever the hell they want to. That's how that shit works. And shame, blame, and explain don't work. Yeah, Lloyd Scott 9 said he's not familiar with this. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna take a deviation, and honestly, this would actually be something that we would show on the LGBTV channel. Shout out to my man KO Kid Fit. This is something that we would show on the LGTV channel. You know what I'm saying? So here's this. Warren introduces bill to unlock millions in tax refunds denied to LGBTQ couples. For years, the IRS banned same-sex married couples from filing joint tax returns and saving on their taxes. Senator Elizabeth Warren is trying to correct that. Well, they weren't able to do that because marriage was supposed to be a union between a husband and wife, not between husband and husband or between wife and wife. Like, that's why. You know what I'm saying? Like, just like how speeding is when you go over the noted speed limit. Like, if the speed limit is 35 and you've been driving 37 and you've gotten tickets and you file for reparations, your those reparations claims are invalid. You've been driving 2 miles over the speed limit. Oh, well, we'll just change the definition of speed limit to plus or minus 2 miles per hour. So we can change the game as we want to. Well, marriage is supposed to be a union between husband and wife, but we'll change the game in the middle of the game and turn the board upside down because we own the board. Shame, blame, and explain. How you going to deal with people that had an ability to do that? We got to create our own ability to do that. Senator Elizabeth Warren on Tuesday reintroduced the Refund Equality Act, a bill that would allow same-sex couples to amend tax returns from the past and receive refunds from the IRS. What do you guys think about that? Righting what they consider past wrongs. You know what I'm saying? Now, here's the question. Okay, looks like Elizabeth Warren knows a little bit of what to do as far as a reparations model. Why has she not done that for us? Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, Katsy, I'm pretty sure it passed. I'm pretty sure that it passed. And now here's my thing, right? Black Loki says, like MJ said, they don't really care about us. Right. Now here's my question, and I want everybody to answer this question honestly. Don't answer it emotionally. Answer it honestly. Do they have to care about us? They care about themselves, which is why they created the system that they have to perpetuate themselves. Caring about us in this particular world is not a necessity. It's not necessary. It's not law. So we need to not have the expectation of people to care. Expecting other people to care about us is shame, blame, and explain. You should care about us because, you know, we have ethics and we care about you. Okay, sure. Hold this bullet in your brain for me. You know what I'm saying?
Up a certain year, if you're for each year you were affected by redlining policy in California, probably easier to prove, and it can probably be proved more directly than slavery itself. But you're then going to take from Hispanic.
Now wait a minute, Black Loki. Black Loki says they don't, but it's crazy how they act virtuous and wear a mask. Is it? Let me ask you a question. Is it crazy that tigers have stripes to blend in with their environment so that they can sneak up on a predator or so they can sneak up on prey? Is that crazy? Or is that smart? Or is that an adaptation? If I have some of the most heinous behavior in the world, it would suit me to hide that and make it seem like I'm the most virtuous in the world, to make it so that nobody would suspect me of such horrific tendencies, right? Like, that would make sense, right? That would probably, out of everything we just talked about, that would probably make the most sense, right? If that makes sense, give me a thumbs up. If it doesn't make any sense, give me a thumbs down.
Taxpayers money and give them, you may be forced to give them to people who look exactly like me and whose family has been in this country long enough to have been, for instance, likely on many sides of this conflict.
This is exactly why I think
so this is the big argument. And we saw this argument before. Who was that did that? Shout out to Afro Elite. I think it was Afro Elite who did that video where he had the white lady on there, or she was native indigenous or something like that. And she was talking about how she would, quote unquote, be entitled to reparations and this, that, and the other. And so now you see this woman right here. You know what I'm saying? This very blonde woman, you know what I'm saying, that's setting up some kind of scenario where she thinks that somehow in the equation, you know what I'm saying, like she might have like a microscopic cork-sized piece of melanin in her and think that she's entitled to some slavery reparations as a result. I wonder how many times anybody pulled her over for her brake light being out. And I agree 110% with two-factor. Morality is not universal. It will always be subject to the framing by people you expect it from. Facts. If you guys agree with two-factor, give me a thumbs up. If you guys disagree, give me a thumbs down. Facts. That is a fact.
I think that trying to parse all this is so ludicrous. And once again, I would say I am not against helping poor Black people.
It's ludicrous. And it's not about helping poor Black people. This is about righting the wrong of slavery, Jim Crow, and Black codes being done against foundational Black Americans and American descendants of slaves. This isn't a charity thing. But again, I'm shame blaming and explaining because I have no way of exacting my consequence. Do you guys understand now why I said, hey, wait a minute? I heard about this shame, blame, and explain. And I said, wait a minute. Man, that shit makes so much sense. That's what the hell we doing in politics. And shout out to you guys for the ×7 combo. I wouldn't disagree with that. I would disagree with saying it's the only way, because I try to avoid absolutes because there's many possibilities for many different situations. But the only way to beat the morally corrupt is to be smarter than them and to be able to see beyond the mask. I would agree with some parts of that. Now I really agree with that. Or adopt the value and lack of morals. Now that's embracing villainy right there. And shout out to Ian 392. Appreciate you, bro.
helping poor Black people or all poor people in this country. In fact, though,
all poor. Let me ask you guys a question. You guys can help me out again. Were all poor people victims of the transatlantic slave trade, Jim Crow, and Black codes? If they were, give me a thumbs up. If they weren't, give me a thumbs down. So again, where's the misinformation ticker on this? Where's the misinformation ticker on this, guys? Where is it? How come it's not on here?
and this is why, trying to parse this, and I never necessarily wanted to, but I think, possibly are forced to, is, you know what? There's better evidence to say that the worst economic hit that ever happened to Black Americans was the 2008 recession.
Right.
Actually, the greatest.
So the 2008 recession was worse than slavery, worse than. I want you guys to make sure that you heard Black breaking points. You guys hear this? Yeah, I agree. Well, and that's their job. That's their ticket here to the United States, was pledging that that's what they do, that's what they're supposed to do. And my thing is that this should be expected. So my question is for you in particular, Ian, what's effective countermeasures? Shout out to Emmanuel. Yeah, I agree. That's retarded coke. Facts. And shout out to Carla for answering the Nightbot. You guys help her out with the Nightbot. Carla is always many times the only one answering that Nightbot. Help her out with that.
To wipe out of Black wealth in the history of the United States happened in 2008. It actually was not, necessarily redlining policies from Jim Crow, as we're discussing repulsive of that debate. I'm not even necessarily comparing apples to oranges. What I'm saying though is that.
What does it have to do with anything? It was still policies that affected all Black people, and those policies affected Black people who were above minimum wage. I like that, Black Loki. I agree. The effective counter is to gain control and force the people to elevate. Now, remember, these guys are supposed to be liberals. This is, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, this is the old crew that used to be on the Hill, Crystal Ball and all of them. But now I want you guys to pay attention how, like, if you're a Black YouTube channel, you're just automatically not, like, you're like, this is considered real news, and like, like what I do is just, it is what it is. And the thing that's interesting is that it's considered, it is what it is by other Black people too. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of Black people subscribe to Breaking Points. There's a lot of Black people subscribe to Jimmy Dore. There's a lot of people that lie about shit, right? Like, I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you. Like, I'm subscribed to this YouTube channel because I watch it. I'm subscribed to Jimmy Dore because I watch it. I watch a lot of different YouTube content creators to get ideas, to get information, to check out trending topics. Like, I have, any reason to tell somebody that I'm not doing what I'm, you know what I'm saying? But most people don't even pay attention. Most people don't even pay attention, but subscribe to these kind of channels, and they will be hesitant to subscribe to content. And then while having that same hesitancy, we'll sit there and say, well, we don't have any big news channels. I mean, why don't we have any big news channels? Because we didn't build any big news channels. That's why. Like, they're not going to fall out of the sky. You know what I'm saying?
Whenever we talk then about addressing, Black wealth and making it so that we can restore people to some sort of equality, not necessarily in terms of outcome, but in terms of opportunity, I would again then have to come back to the idea that we should look at the policies, the actual policies that led to the wealth disparity.
I'm trying to tell you guys. Shame, blame, and explain. We've got people that aren't even from this country that are putting themselves in front of white people to shield them from shame, blame, and explain. So now here's my question. How do we deal with that?
That we are right now, some of which include Jim Crow, but also now we're talking about 2008, which was a universalist kind of screw you to middle class and to poor people, and then say, well, is there some way you can normalize opportunity here across the board?
Yeah.
And by doing so, in general, as I've always come back to, I recommend Matt Brunegg, if anybody wants to go and look at it, has frequently looked at where actual wealth gaps are. My personal favorite statistic is you'll often hear in the media, like the white and the black wealth gap. Well, the truth is, sadly, is that the wealth gap between white and black Americans on an overall basis, the vast majority of that gap is between the top 10% of white people and the top 10% of black people, as in the top 10.
What does it have to do with how Jim Crow, black codes, and slavery damaged foundational black Americans? We're talking about wealth disparities. Yeah, this country has an economy. What you're talking about is an economic issue. But again, I can say that a million times. Shame, blame, and explain. And I literally have nothing on my side backing me or helping me be able to implement a consequence. Do you guys see how that works? If you guys see how that works, give me a thumbs up. If you guys don't see how that works, give me a thumbs down.
10% earners of whites out-earn dramatically the top 10% of black. But if you take the median earner between whites and blacks, Hispanics, and others, like I said, the gap between those on a wage level is really not that big. And so if you want to help the most amount of people, increasing an overall wage in the economy has the actual benefit that we all come to.
Yeah, that's not what this is about. All right, is something wrong with you? This isn't about fixing the economy. This isn't about saving the poor. This isn't philanthropy or charity. This is about a specific group of people that endured damages from a specific wrong that the United States government took a part in. That's what this is for. I want you guys to pay very close attention to how they try to recreate the scenario and recreate the argument and literally change everything every single time. Do you guys see that? You guys see that, right? And again, remember, these are supposed to be your liberals.
Well, and we can't even have honest conversations about what's happened with entitlements and welfare state. And I know that gets into really hairy stuff, but Thomas Sowell can talk about this. Walter Williams can write about this, and they get cast as like white supremacists for raising some entirely legitimate questions about whether white liberals.
Now, again, this is a white liberal network promoting Thomas Sowell. Now, well, Thomas Sowell writes about this. Does he? Real quick, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys haven't smashed the like button, please take a moment. Make sure you guys smash that like button. Also, if you guys haven't hit the bell, make sure you guys hit that bell icon twice. All right. If you guys haven't shared the video to your social media, take a moment, share the video to your social media, and also make sure you guys check out my backup channel. Okay.
Have wrecked the Black community with well-intentioned but harmful policies that don't have, for instance, that aren't temporary enough, that aren't with the right incentives. And a lot of our audience probably disagrees with me on that. All I'm saying, though, is that we cannot even talk about the government structures that in some ways have been contributing to this, and I think very clearly, because it's just you get knocked down as a bigot or whatever, even if you're a Black economist, like a celebrated Black economist, for having that conversation. And again, the theme of the whole episode today.
I want you guys to make sure you guys see this. Do you guys see them caping for Thomas Sowell? I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying. So now, how many people do you think that this kind of stuff has brainwashed right here? How many people do you think are brainwashed by this kind of stuff? And this is what's so funny, right? White people actually sit there and get mad about the liberal media, and they talk about, oh, you know, the liberal media, this, that, and other. Now, you know that most of them don't support reparations, but damn, they must be really bad if they can see like that this is that bad and they try to troll us about it. You know what I'm saying?
is that we can't even perform basic functions as a society because we're so bogged down in these tribal divisions.
Correct. Well, we do have one update, though, for you whenever it comes to these reparations. They probably are not going to happen. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. Despite the fact that they have been proposed and all of that, even the San Francisco Gate here is saying, quote, why they are likely doomed. One of the reasons why is that they say, whenever you've seen his way to make amends, the task force has spent the last 2 years. However, the package that is being discussed, even in terms of San Francisco, is some sort of one-time payments and all of that, even if they're formally adopted, never go into effect, is because of the U.S. Supreme Court. What they say is that the simplest form in terms of benefits is likely dead upon arrival, because the idea of a particular race getting payments would almost immediately and certainly get struck down. This is Gabriel Chin, who is a law professor quoted from the UC Davis. Most likely to be at play would be the Equal Protections Clause in the 14th Amendment, which I was specifically speaking about, which said that any policy that sort people by racial categories known as racial classifications are typically seen as a violation of the Equal Protection Clause unless governments can provide, quote, a strong justification for them. So very likely, even if this were to try and to go into effect, it would face blockage at the U.S. Supreme Court. But who knows? We never know where we will get in terms of that. And even if they don't get implemented, the fact that they're on the table, I think for the discussion that we try to handle sensitively here at Breaking Points.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now. And Soccer and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us.
So much for that, right? So much for that. Nonsense. It's very interesting how he was allowed to sit there and say a whole lot of misinformation and not really too much done about it. So there's a video, and it might have been on your homepage. It was definitely on mine, and we're going to take a look at it. It's called 10 Facts About Slave Breeding That School Failed to Teach You. Now, let me ask you guys a question. Did school teach you about slave breeding at all before we even get into the 10 facts? If it did, give me a thumbs up. If it didn't, give me a thumbs down. Now, let me ask you guys a question before we get into this. How many groups of people here in the United States went through this? Can you guys name people that went through this? And remember, what I want everybody to pay very close attention to, right, with this particular thing, especially I want the people on Rumble to pay real close attention to this, is that this is what you're inviting us to. This is how you want us to this is how you're asking us to respond. Because remember, this isn't that bad. So if this isn't that bad, then this is something that everybody should be prepared to endure, because it just isn't that bad. According to them, it's a natural part of the human experience. Because remember, quote unquote, everybody had slaves. Well, now, let me know if you guys know about any Irish people that went through something like this.
We all know the story of slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, the forced labor, the inhumane treatment of men, women, and children, and the eventual abolition of the slave trade. But what many of us don't know is that the abolition of the slave trade in the early 19th century led to the creation of a new and even more sinister aspect of slavery: sex farms and slave breeding farms. The goal of these farms was simple: to produce more slaves. Slave owners realized that they could no longer import slaves from Africa, so they turned to breeding them like animals. They would carefully select which slaves would mate with each other based on their physical attributes, health, and even intelligence, in the hopes of producing the strongest and most profitable offspring. Slave breeding farms were located throughout the southern United States, with some estimates suggesting that there were as many as 70 in operation at the height of their popularity. These farms were often run by wealthy plantation owners who saw slave breeding as a lucrative business opportunity. But the horrors of slave breeding farms did not stop there. In some cases, plantation owners would set up sex farms, where slaves, often young girls, were forced to engage in sexual activity with other slaves or with the plantation owners themselves.
Business. You guys hear that? It was a lucrative business opportunity. Pay attention to this. Slaves would be mated with each other based on their physical attributes and health. I want you guys to understand that these people created their own NFL. They created their own NBA. They created their own Major League Baseball. Let me ask you guys a question. Did white people breed black people for intelligence on these slave farms? If white people breeded black people on these slave farms for intelligence, give me a thumbs up. If they didn't, give me a thumbs down. If you happen to be intelligent, you're defective and you probably didn't survive. You probably find yourself like Peter or like Captain Hook in the belly of an alligator. I agree. If you guys agree with Cameron, give me a thumbs up. If you guys don't agree with Cameron, give me a thumbs down. So now here's my question. How should we deal with this? Because they said that this isn't bad. 20-year plan, 30-year plan, 40-year plan, 50-year plan, 100-year plan. Because remember, this isn't that bad, which means that it's an invitation. This is an invitation, right? Nothing that happened was that bad, which means that it's something that everybody could endure and would be perfectly okay in the confines of my ethical thresholds, because we've been given the pass by society that this is okay. So just remember, don't get emotional about it. Just remember, it's okay. So if we're remembering that it's okay, then that means that what we're really remembering and what we're really thinking about and what we're really paying attention to is the time frame on us reversing the situation. They won't even cop to the fact that they bred their own NBA. We're all the products of genetic engineering, and they're still genetic engineering to this day. That's one of the reasons why they have all of those people in the projects together on top of each other, so they can have a steady stream of crash test dummies that they can show on the news and perpetuate those as if they're the same as every other black person. That's why it's called the projects, because it's a genetics project. It's a science project. And then we'll socially engineer by picking the people from this group inside of our project that we want to move them to other projects like Hollywood and sports and politics. This never stopped. It's just been repackaged. So the thing is that to me, if you find yourself as one of those people that just feels like the world isn't right and you really want to do something a lot more drastic than most people want to do, you're not alone. And the reason why you feel that way is because maybe you got lucky and missed a gene or two, because you definitely weren't bred to think like that.
Health, and even intelligence, in the hopes of producing the strongest and most profitable offspring. Slave breeding farms were located throughout the southern United States, with some estimates suggesting that there were as many as 70 in operation at the height of their popularity. These farms were often run by wealthy plantation owners.
Remember, this isn't that bad. So just don't think about it when you think about having somebody else up on that table, because they will be up on that table. Just think about it when it's somebody else's wife or somebody else's mother or somebody else's grandmother on the floor. Remember, it's not that bad. So you'll be able to clear your conscience. You won't have to think about this, because remember, as many years as we've been told that this isn't that bad, as many years as we've been told that this is okay, as many years as we've been told, well, this was necessary to build America. Well, you know what? This is necessary for us too. So, I mean, you understand, right?
Owners who saw slave breeding as a lucrative business opportunity. But the horrors of slave breeding farms did not stop there. In some cases, plantation owners would set up sex farms, where slaves, often young girls, were forced to engage in sexual activity with other slaves or with the plantation owners themselves. The offspring of these forced sexual encounters were also seen as profitable commodities and were often sold off at auctions to the highest bidder. The true extent of
a business. Now, let me ask you guys a question. Did that racism there create value? Do you think that any of those people were financially high value men? So what it seems to me is that racism goes hand in hand with, ironically, high value. Elon Musk made a lot of his money based on his apartheid handouts. Well.
These practices is difficult to quantify, as records often destroyed or deliberately hidden. But it is estimated that thousands of slaves were forced to participate in these breeding programs, resulting in countless atrocities and human rights violations. In this video, we are going to reveal 10 of—
And that's the point. There should literally be not one non-black person watching this video in fear of it happening to you. As a matter of fact, when it does happen to you, what you should be doing is showing us how to endure it better than we did. And see, that's the kind of time that people need to be on, because remember, this is a shared human experience. It's not that bad. And if it's not that bad, then that means that you should be able to deal with it a little bit.
the most horrific facts of slave breeding and sex farms in the United States. These facts may be uncomfortable to hear, but it's important to acknowledge the brutality and inhumanity of slavery in all its forms. But before that, hit the subscribe button to stay on this channel for more content like this. Fact number 1. Enslaved women were seen as breeding machines and impregnated by several men. One of the most disturbing facts about sex farms during slavery is that enslaved women were seen as little more than breeding machines. Plantation owners and overseers saw them as a means of producing more enslaved people to—
And that's what they see us as now still. Shout out to Izar. What's good with it? That's Vega. That's what they see us as now still. And they think that is funny. You know what I'm saying? The project of the projects is the new breeding farm. And that's why you have so many people in the projects just, you know what I'm saying, making plenty of kids. You get the free food, go to WIC. They don't have these slave trading or these slave breeding places anymore. They have slave breeding regions now. They got entire slave breeding regions now.
To increase their wealth and power. In order to achieve this goal, enslaved women were often forced to have sex with several men, regardless of their own desires or consent. This practice was particularly prevalent in the Deep South, where the climate and soil were well suited to the cultivation of cotton, and the demand for enslaved labor was high. Enslaved women on these plantations were often subjected to brutal physical and sexual abuse, with no hope of escape or redress. They were seen as property, rather than human beings, and their bodies were treated as such. The practice of forced breeding was not limited to the Deep South, however.
So now let me ask you guys a question. Is there any Irish accounts of this? Italian? Now, let me ask you guys a question. Wouldn't forced breeding affect people who are alive today? I need you guys to answer these questions for me in the comment section. When people watch the live chat, you know what I'm saying? Wouldn't it? Let me know. And shout out to Carla for answering Streamlabs.
It was also common in other regions of the country, including the Chesapeake Bay Area and the Upper South. Plantation owners in these areas also saw enslaved women as a means of increasing their wealth and power and used them accordingly. The evidence for the forced breeding of enslaved women can be found in a number of historical sources. Plantation records, for example, often include references to enslaved women who were breeders or breeding stock. These records also reveal the number of children produced by these women, as well as their age, health, and other relevant information. In addition to plantation records, there are also numerous slave narratives that document the experiences of enslaved women who were forced to breed. One such narrative is that of Harriet Jacobs.
So now here's my question. You know, when it comes to any of these Event H survivors, whatever they write is looked at as fact. You don't even hear about these people that have gone through this. Why is that? Why haven't we heard about this, guys? That's the question. How come we haven't heard about this? Let me know in the comment section.
An enslaved woman who lived in North Carolina in the mid-19th century. In her memoir, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, Jacobs describes the horror of being forced to have sex with her owner in order to produce children. Fact number 2. Female slaves were forced into sexual relationships with their owners or overseers. Sexual abuse of female slaves was widespread during the period of American slavery. Slave women were not only subjected to forced labor, but also to sexual exploitation by their owners and overseers. This practice was not limited to any particular region or plantation, but it was prevalent throughout the American South. The first evidence of sexual abuse of female slaves can be traced back to the transatlantic slave trade. Female slaves were often taken captive and forced to endure the long and arduous journey across the Atlantic in cramped and unsanitary conditions. During this journey, slave women were subjected to sexual abuse by the crew members and other male slaves.
It's not that bad. It's not that bad, guys. So now you don't have to have a conscience. You know? Now you don't have to have a conscience. What do you guys think? Smash that like button if you guys haven't smashed the like button. Also, if you guys haven't hit the bell, make sure you guys hit the bell. And also, please make sure you take a moment and share the video to your social media.
Once in the American, female slaves acted more sexual abuse. This abuse took many forms, including rape, forced sexual relationships, and prostitution. Owners and overseers would often take advantage of their power and authority to coerce slave women into sexual relationships. These relationships were often violent and non-consensual, and many slave women were impregnated as a result. The children born from these forced sexual relationships were not considered the children of their fathers, but rather the property of their mother's owners. This meant that these children were also slaves and could be sold or traded just like any other commodity. This practice was particularly common in the Upper South, where slaves were bred for sale to the Lower South. One example of this practice can be found in the story of Sally Hemings, a slave woman who was...
So now, again, like on the hill, on the rising, they didn't mention any of this, but let me ask you guys a question so that we can be 110% sure. When we talk about reparations, this is the majority of the kind of thing that we're talking about. This particular thing right here, right? If it is, give me a thumbs up. If it's not, give me a thumbs down.
Owned by former U.S. President Thomas Jefferson. Hemings was forced into a sexual relationship with Jefferson, and she gave birth to 6 children, 4 of whom survived to adulthood. These children were not recognized as Jefferson's children during his lifetime, but DNA evidence has since confirmed their paternity. Another particularly disturbing example of sexual abuse is the case of Celia, a slave woman who was owned by Robert Newsom in Missouri. Newsom repeatedly raped Celia, and when she became pregnant, he refused to acknowledge the child as his own. When Celia killed Newsom in an act of self-defense, she was tried and convicted of murder and hanged. This case highlights the brutal reality of sexual abuse and violence that many slave women faced in the American South. Fact number 3. The offspring produced on sex farms were separated from their families and sold as soon as they were weaned. The practice of separating
Now, do you
families...
see that? It's just like the NBA draft, just like the NFL draft. These products that are produced in the projects, they go right on the chopping board for athletics, D1 through D4 schools. They're not breeding anybody to get any academic scholarships, though. Now, what I want to know from everybody is, what other group did Asian people go through this in the United States? What other group of people went through this in the United States? That's the question. Lloyd Sky 9 said, athletes are stupid to not see the dynamics. You could have also made that sentence shorter by just ending it at athletes are stupid. Shout out to John Moran.
During slavery was widespread, and it was not uncommon for enslaved children to be sold away from their parents. However, on sex farms, this practice was particularly prevalent. Enslaved women who were forced to breed were often impregnated by men who were not their husbands or partners. As a result, the children produced on sex farms were not part of a nuclear family unit, but rather a product to be sold for profit. According to historical records, many plantation owners saw the sale of enslaved children as a lucrative business opportunity. The price of an enslaved child varied depending on factors such as age, gender, and health, but they were generally sold for a higher price than adult enslaved people. This was because the children had the potential to grow up and become productive laborers, as well as future breeders themselves. In many cases, enslaved children were sold at public auctions, where they would be separated from their mothers and other family members. These auctions were often traumatic for both the enslaved people being sold and those who remained behind. In his book, The Half Has Never Been Told: Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism, historian Edward E. Baptist describes the emotional pain that families experienced when they were separated. Enslaved people wailed and moaned, sobbed and screamed, and many of them ran to the edge of the auction platform, reaching for children or parents or lovers who were being sold away from them. The separation of families on sex farms had long-lasting effects on the enslaved people involved. Children who were sold away from their mothers often faced a lifetime of trauma and loss, and parents who were forced to give up their children lived with the pain of that separation for the rest of their lives. Fact number 4. Some plantation owners would offer rewards to enslaved men who could impregnate the most women. It may seem unimaginable to think that a person could be rewarded for impregnating multiple, but this was a reality for some enslaved men on sex farms during slavery. Plantation owners would offer incentives to enslaved men who could produce the most offspring, which would be sold for profit. This practice perpetuated the dehumanization of enslaved people and further cemented their status as property rather than human beings with agency and autonomy. In some cases, plantation owners would even go so far as to pit enslaved men against each other in a competition to impregnate the most women. This not only caused harm to the enslaved women who were forced to participate in this system, but also created a toxic environment among enslaved men who were forced to compete with each other for the approval of their enslavers. One example of this can be found in the diary of a plantation owner named James Hammond.
Now, do y'all think that that has anything to do with people's current day behavior? But I guarantee you that Thomas Sowell didn't write about this in any of his books. They were sitting there giving people rewards for getting the most slaves pregnant. So now the thing is that if you pay very close attention to what was going on back then, this social engineering that was going on back then, you see a lot of these things as toxic remnants in what we do now. These are toxic remnants of things that we do now as societal behaviors. So now, again, I got to ask the question. It wasn't that bad, right? This would be, I don't know, an interesting part of role reversal, wouldn't it? I wonder how it would affect them. Do you think that this is where they got their idea for porno movies from? Because I don't think that's something that we invented, but I could definitely see how something like this would inspire it. I wonder if the P in porn is possibly because of plantation. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
Who owned several plantations in South Carolina in the 1800s. In his diary, Hammond detailed his efforts to breed enslaved people for profit and boasted about the fertility of his enslaved women. He wrote that he offered rewards to the enslaved men who could impregnate the most women, stating that it was a great stimulus for them. This type of behavior.
So now, do you guys remember when I was joking around and I was saying FBA stood for Feral Black Americans? I know if Carlton Way's still in here, I know he remembers that. And I know Moxie Approved remembers that too. But some people got really upset and butthurt when I said that. And I said, get your emotions under control. There's a reason why I'm saying it. And it's not to be disrespectful. It's to drive home a point. What does feral mean? Somebody give me the definition of feral in the chat.
Behavior is not only morally reprehensible, but it also had lasting consequences for the enslaved people who were forced to participate in the system. The offspring produced in this way were often sold as soon as they were weaned, leading to the separation of families and further dehumanization of enslaved people.
Now, let me ask you guys a question. Why is it that the rappers and the athletes always come from the breeding projects? It is wild without home knowledge. Now go look up the word Akata. And drop in the comment section what the word Akata means. Now, why would anybody call anybody an Akata? A feral cat. What does feral mean? Uncivilized. Wild without home knowledge. Yeah, nigga. Feral. So when somebody calls you an Akata, just understand they're specifically and directly laughing at this. But remember, we're xenophobic. Just a side note.
Fact number 5. Enslaved women who were deemed to be good breeders were often treated better than those who were not. With the abolition of the slave trade, enslavers turned to women to expand the numbers of their slaves. During this time, women were viewed as reproductive machines, and their ability to bear children was a significant factor in determining their value. Enslaved women who were deemed to be good breeders were highly valued.
Unable to domesticate into servitude. What do you mean, nigga? There is no such thing as white supremacy and racism. Unable to domesticate into servitude. You think any of that? You think any of that is an accident or depraved background? So let me ask you guys a question now. Is everybody now familiar, and does everybody now understand the exact reason why the word Akata was chosen by those particular people to be a insult towards us? Does it make sense now? If it makes sense, give me a thumbs up. If it doesn't make sense, give me a thumbs down.
And plantation owners treated them better than those who had. According to historian Deirdre Cooper Owens, plantation owners would use various criteria to determine which women were good breeders. Some factors included age, physical attributes, and fertility rates. Enslaved women who met these criteria were forced to have sex with male slaves, often against their will, and were then closely monitored throughout their pregnancies to ensure that they produced healthy offspring. Plantation owners often provided better living conditions.
The name of this channel is Black Journals. It's called Black Journals, and I'll put the link into the chat once we get done with this video here. If we end up getting done with it, I might have to end early.
And food to enslaved women who were good breeders. They would also give them preferential treatment in terms of work assignments and punishments. This was because the offspring produced by these women were more valuable and profitable for the plantation owner. One example of this can be seen in the life.
You mean the coach? You mean the team owner? You mean the franchise owner? See how that works? You mean for the record label? Now, how come some of those people that reacted to those Thomas Sowell videos, how come they didn't react to this? I know they saw it. I know they saw it. Why didn't they react to this? And real quick, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys haven't smashed the like button, please make sure you guys take a moment, smash that like button. Also, if you guys haven't hit the bell, make sure you guys hit that bell icon twice. Make sure you guys subscribe to my backup channels, share the stream out, and also share the stream to somebody that you know is going to watch it.
Life of the famous abolitionist, Harriet Jacobs. Jacobs was enslaved in North Carolina and was forced to have 2 children with her owner, Dr. James Norcom. He was deemed a good breeder and was treated relatively well compared to other enslaved women on the plantation. However, Jacobs refused to have any more children with Norcom and chose to hide in a small attic space for 7 years to avoid his advances. Despite the preferential treatment that some enslaved women received, they were still subject to the brutal conditions of slavery. They were still considered property and were forced to have sex against their will. Fact number 6. Slave breeding was a profitable business for slave owners and seen as a way to increase the owner's wealth. The breeding of enslaved people allowed
So let me ask you guys a question. So see, now we go into the high value man conversation. So now do you see why you're taught not to be racist and why you're taught to love everybody? Is because racism was used against you to create billions of trillions of dollars in wealth and asset control for other people. Name me somebody that's filthy rich without the assistance of racism. Name me one person. Name me a person, guys. Fact number 6, slave breeding was a profitable business. And remember, if we live in the United States and the United States is a capitalist country, no American will ever see anything wrong with doing good business practices. Good business practices are practices that bring money. Okay? Fact number 6 says that slave breeding was a profitable business for slave owners. Let me ask you guys a question. Is profitable business something that's respected in a capitalist society, or is that something that's not respected in a capitalist society? Which one?
The breeding of enslaved people allowed plantation owners to increase their wealth by producing more enslaved people without having to pay for additional labor. Plantation owners often kept detailed records of the children born on their farms, noting their age.
Emmanuel Carey says they can't breed us openly anymore, so now they do it to their bitches. I mean, dogs. I disagree. I believe that we are still being bred openly, and I believe that each and every single one of us in this room is a result of that breeding. We're being bred in the open currently as we speak. Here's my question: why do you think we're not being bred openly anymore? And they also, I mean, they also can, like, they can do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, they've literally shown evidence of them just doing whatever it is that they want to kids anywhere. Foster system, migrants in prison, or migrants in migrant holding cells. I mean, they don't have any regard for children. Emmanuel Carey says the sense of them overseeing. They have rental offices in the projects. They have a mayor of the city. They have a governor of the state, multiple senators. How are they not overseeing? You know what I'm saying? It's just that the overseers just don't look like a traditional overseer holding a whip.
Sex, and parentage. These records served as a way for owners to keep track of their assets and to calculate the value of their property. Children born to enslaved mothers were often sold at auction, with the price being determined by a number of factors, including their age, health, and sex. The profitability of the breeding of enslaved people can be seen in the records like that of Thomas Thistlewood. The Jamaican plantation owner kept meticulous records of his breeding practices that would be revealed centuries later. Between 1750—
the Jamaican. This is a white guy that was a Jamaican slave owner. He kept meticulous records of his breeding practices. Remember, it wasn't that bad. So literally everybody should be okay with this when people finally wake up and start saying, they've been telling us to do this to them for years. We just be acting like we're a little bit special sometimes. We'll get it eventually.
Be seen in the records like that of Thomas Thistlewood. The Jamaican plantation owner kept meticulous records of his breeding practices that would be revealed centuries later. Between 1750 and 1786, he recorded over 3,000 births on his farm, with many of these children being the result of forced breeding. Thistlewood saw the breeding of enslaved people as a way to increase his wealth, noting in his diary that all slaves are profitable, but breeding women more so than men. Another example of the profitability of slave breeding can be seen in the story of Isaac Franklin and John Armfield, two slave traders who operated in Alexandria, Virginia.
So now here's the question. How do they have all the information for all these people? And so the thing that I find interesting is that we already saw what white people did with Carolyn Bryant. So what people need to be understanding of and preparing for, and just have a good understanding and realize this, is that nobody cares. You saw how they handled Carolyn Bryant, right? Nobody cares, which means that nobody's going to care about this. The people that have to care about this and dealing with this and avenging this situation is us. And that's why there's only 50 people in here, because this requires some shit for us to do. If this was just some bullshit, some shame, blame, and explain, some woo, 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 this got done, woo, 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 this got done, it'd be mad people in here. And again, those are even more of the reasons why I feel the evidence supports that people are more interested in wasting people's time than they are in actually preserving time. You know what I'm saying? And actually buying time. And real quick, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys haven't smashed that like button, make sure you guys smash that like button. Also, if you guys haven't hit that bell, make sure you guys hit that bell. And also, if you guys have not shared the stream, please take a moment, share the stream to your social media, and also follow my backup channels.
Franklin and Armfield specialized in the slave trade and made a fortune by buying and selling slaves. They also engaged in the practice of slave breeding, and Franklin is estimated to have fathered over 600 children with female slaves in his possession. These children were then sold or traded for a profit. In addition to these records, there are numerous other historical documents that provide striking evidence to these barbaric practices. For example, advertisements for slave auctions often highlighted the breeding capabilities of enslaved women, with phrases such as prolific breeders or good breeders being used to describe them. These advertisements serve as a stark reminder of the inhumane and exploitative nature of the slave trade. Fact number 7. Plantation owners would hire doctors to oversee the breeding of enslaved people and to treat any medical issues that arose. While it may seem paradoxical for doctors, who are supposed to be healers, to oversee the breeding of enslaved people, this was a common practice on many plantations during the antebellum period. Plantation owners would hire doctors to ensure that enslaved women were healthy enough to breed, and any medical issues that arose during the breeding process. One particularly notorious example of this was Dr. J. Marion Sims, who is often referred to as the father of modern gynecology.
Now, nobody would tell you that gynecology came from that. Father of modern gynecology. Well, here's my question for everybody in the chat. If he's the father of modern gynecology, then my question for you guys is, well, who's the mother? Because fathers just don't spontaneously create offspring. And if he's the father, then what that means is that he has an offspring. So my question for you guys is, who are his offspring? Who are these people?
Modern gynecology. Sims performed a number of experimental surgeries on enslaved women in the mid-1800s, including surgeries to repair fistulas, a condition that often occurred during childbirth. Sims conducted these surgeries without anesthesia, as he believed that enslaved people did not experience pain in the same way as white people.
They didn't believe that. These people just like cutting on people while they were alive. Remember, it wasn't that bad. Man, when things change, medical school sure is going to be interesting. When the world changes, when people finally wake up, man, I hope medical school enrollment has an all-time high. Just saying.
His work on fistulas led to the development of new surgical techniques, but it came at a great cost to the enslaved women who were subjected to his experiments. In addition to performing surgeries, doctors were also responsible for ensuring that enslaved women were healthy enough to produce offspring. This often involved monitoring their diets and treating any illnesses that could affect their ability to conceive. However, it's important to note that this care was not provided out of concern for the well-being of the enslaved people, but rather to ensure that they were able to produce more enslaved people for the plantation owner's profit. Fact number 8. Enslaved women on sex farms were often given inadequate nutrition and health care, leading to high rates of
Now, do you think that there's a vested interest in us creating, quote unquote, more bottom class people for somebody's interest? Do you guys think that? If you guys think that, give me a thumbs up. If you guys don't think that, give me a thumbs down.
infant mortality. While fertile women were considered valuable and used as reproductive machines to produce more slaves on sex farms, the living conditions on these farms were not any better, and as a result, many infants did not survive. Enslaved women on sex farms were forced to work long hours in the fields, which meant that they were not able to take care of their babies as they should. The infants were often malnourished and sickly, and the women had no access to proper medical care to help them. This would contribute to the high rates of infant mortality as at that time. One example of this is the case of the Louisiana State Penitentiary, also known as Angola Prison. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Angola Prison had a large population of enslaved women who were forced to work on a sex farm. The women were subjected to brutal treatment and were given little food and water. They were also denied medical care and were forced to give birth in filthy conditions.
Now, let me ask you guys a question again. I keep asking this question because I'm trying to drive home a point here. Can anybody give me the names of any Irish people that this happened to? Maybe an experience like this would help people differentiate the difference between indentured servitude and slavery. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that this would be good for certain groups of people, specifically those groups of people that say that we whine about it too much? Because what they're saying is that we can show you how to go through this without whining. So they should be given what they want, right? It's only natural, right?
which led to high rates of infant mortality. In a report published by the American Public Health Association in 1915, it was noted that the infant mortality rate at Angola prison was 75%. This means that out of every 4 infants born on the farm, only 1 survived. This is a staggering statistic and shows just how dire the situation was for these women and their children. Unfortunately, Angola prison was not the only place case. Many other sex farms across the country had similarly high rates of infant mortality. The women who were forced to work on these farms were subjected to unimaginable cruelty, leading to the death of their babies. Fact number 9. The practice of slave breeding and sex farms continued even after the abolition of slavery. Even after the abolition of slavery, the practice of slave breeding and sex farms continued in some parts of the United States. While the 13th Amendment to the Constitution abolished slavery in 1865, it did not prohibit the practice of slave breeding or sexual exploitation of former.
So people were still getting bread. People were still getting bread after the slave trade, or people were still getting bread after the Emancipation Proclamation. So now again, right, we've gotten all of this evidence. We got all of this historical evidence, right? Now we got all of this historical evidence, and that historical evidence is going to help us with what? The only thing that this historic evidence can do is help us with shame, blame, and explain, because we don't have no way of giving any consequences. So now this is what I keep asking this question. What ways do people want to try to start creating strategies to try to implement consequences? What area do people want to implement the complement, or do people want to implement the consequences in? When you start talking about this particular part of things, this is where people start to act like they are frozen. You know what I'm saying? Which again, if people start to act like that, that tells me again that we're doing the time wasting advocacy again, right? The time wasting advocacy, because the time wasting advocacy is that many people like how this kind of stuff sounds. Very few people like what's necessary in order to get this kind of stuff started. So then we went to the time wasting fallacy. You know what I'm saying?
Slaves. In fact, there is evidence to suggest that the practice of slave breeding continued in some parts of the South well into the early 20th century. This was due in part to the fact that many former slaves continued to work on the same plantations where they had been enslaved and were still subject to the same exploitative and abusive conditions. One of the most well-known cases of post-abolition slave breeding occurred in Natchez, Mississippi. Between the late 1860s and the early 1900s, wealthy white planters in the area engaged in a system of fancy trade, where they would buy and sell young, light-skinned African-American women who were specifically bred for their physical appearance and sexual appeal.
There you go. Colorism. And we get blamed for it all the time. You listen to YouTube professors. The YouTube professors will tell you that the colorism is all because of black men. They won't tell you that the men that they worship are the ones that created the colorism. All of that shit that people call exoticals and all of this shit. Biracials and all this weird ass shit that these deviant motherfuckers have come up with, classifying other black people. You know what I'm saying? But here you go. Here's your evidence. And then again, aside from that, there's the 1 drop rule. So why do people see light-skinned people in a different way? Is it because it was beat into them to see them people that way? Now, my thing is that, you know, like I said, I am under the impression that every single black person is a victim of white supremacist brain damage, which is one of the reasons why I never say about people's relationship habits, because we don't know what the fuck we're dealing with. While women on YouTube think that it's funny and shit to troll people and call shit a preference, and Dr. Umar Johnson, who's a psychologist who understands these things, but for whatever reason says the things that he says, how many people suffer with depression every day? Emperor Rex don't want me to get paid. He mad because it's ads. So I shouldn't get paid. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I'm just putting you on Front Street, Emperor Rex. So, you know, we really don't know what's going on as far as in our brains until we try to actually take a deep dive in our brain. But some people think that it's funny. You know what I'm saying? It's a joke. It's hilarious. I mean, like, why not make fun of somebody's pathology if I can get paid for it? That's not, you're not going to get paid as a psychologist, because that's against all kind of ethical codes if you want anybody to look at you as any kind of professional. But for a career in the YouTube Super Bowl, that's sufficient. You know what I'm saying? That's sufficient. You know what I mean? So my thing is, it's interesting, right? And I'm gonna just pose this question. You got female YouTubers out here that talk about quote unquote pathologies and shit like that. But now, what do we do when we go deep and we look at a situation like this, and then you happen to look like another form of the pathology? Then what? Then how do we unpack that? How do we unpack that when it's light-skinned people that are saying this kind of shit, shaming people, and then when we get farther down the video says, well, you know, there's been a slave-based pathology called colorism that was an idea of white men that was put into black people's heads about other black people. Oh, if you're light-skinned, you're more attractive. What's the difference between that and any other quote-unquote preference? It's all a result of white supremacist brain damage. Nobody knows what is actually natural to them to find attractive anymore because of years of social conditioning and engineering. And yet and still, we act like we still on the motherland and shit. Things have fucking changed. You know what I'm saying? And this is the shit that I be trying to explain to people. People like to use these crafty little excerpts and blurbs from, you know what I'm saying, like Dr. Amos Wilson and Francis Cress Welsing and Neely Fuller Jr. But those are scholars who are academic, intelligent, well-spoken, well-articulated, well-studied black people who would want their works to continue to be studied and expanded on. And hashtagging the shit isn't doing that. Now, most psychology and psychological issues come from trauma, right? Let's get a consensus on that. Do most psychological issues and quote unquote psychological pathologies come from trauma? If they come from trauma, give me a thumbs up. If they don't come from trauma, give me a thumbs down. Now, let me ask you guys a question. I mean, have I presented sufficient evidence that this could be a trauma-based origin of a lot of the psychology that we deal with? Not only genetic, but also environmental?
The South well into the early 20s. This was to the fact that many former slaves continued to work on the same plantations where they had been enslaved and were still subject to the same exploitative and abusive conditions.
Many black people still stayed on the plantations that they was raised on. Look at all these black people that work in the freaking government. You working for the same if you're a black person and you work for any branch of the government, not just the police, any branch of this corrupt ass government, you literally are back on the plantation. Like this is the exact same shit right here. You know what I'm saying? Those were the fucking buildings that created the laws that allowed the plantations to be alive or around. You know what I'm saying?
One of the most well-known cases of post-abolition slave breeding occurred in Natchez, Mississippi. Between the late 1860s and the early 1900s, wealthy white planters in the area engaged in a system of fancy trade, where they would buy and sell young, light-skinned African-American women who were specifically bred for their physical appearance and sexual appeal.
Fancy trade is what they called it. And you have all of America telling you that this isn't that bad. So the one good thing is that America says that this isn't that bad. But at the same time, the bad thing is that America says that this isn't that bad. Now, let me ask you something. Let's do the this isn't that bad test. If this isn't that bad, then we should be able to always go around a bunch of white people and talk about planning to do some shit like this, and they should cheer us on, right? Right?
These women, known as fancy girls, were often the daughters of mixed-race slaves and were sold at auction for exorbitant prices. They were then forced into sexual relationships with white plantation owners and their male guests, and their offspring were often sold back into the slave trade. In addition to the fancy trade, there were also...
See? And mixed people got a nerve to hate black people. We wasn't doing this shit to you. We didn't sell you back into the slave trade. We didn't sell them back into the slave trade.
Mixed-race slaves and were sold at auction for exorbitant prices.
People become slaves every day, B.
Abusive conditions. One of the most well-known cases of post-abolition slave breeding occurred in Natchez, Mississippi. Between the late 1860s and the early 1900s, wealthy white planters in the area engaged in a system of fancy trade, where they would buy and sell young, light-skinned African-American women who were specifically bred for their physical appearance and sexual appeal. These women...
Sexual appeal to who? Because these African slaves here, they had never seen no lights. Like these slaves here, unless they had been in contact with some Arabs, they had not seen light-skinned black people like that. Just like they hadn't seen no white people like that. So they didn't create these women based off of a sex appeal on these individuals, because these individuals had never been in contact with some light-skinned women. Light-skinned people were produced as a result of, you know, in Africa dealing with Arabs, and in the United States and in Africa as a result of dealing with Europeans. Aside from that, you were dealing with sub-Saharan Africans, which are darker skinned, heavily melanated people. You know what I'm saying? So they're talking about these men here, the slave masters, quote unquote, sex appeal. They wanted to have them some light-skinned chick. You know what I'm saying? Somebody had mentioned Meghan Markle. Yeah, they wanted their ass a Meghan Markle. You know what I'm saying? Now, there's some people, you know what I'm saying, who legit you know, they'll go into a different environment and, you know, they'll settle. You know what I'm saying? And if you ask me, like, that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But that's not the majority of people, though. The majority of people tend to kind of settle into their own group, especially if you've never been exposed to other people before. These sub-Saharan African people that were part of the slave trade, they had not been exposed to no quote unquote Meghan Markle looking people until race mixing here in the United States happened as a result of not voluntary interracial unions, but because of the breeding farms that happened. You know what I'm saying? And I want you guys to pay very close attention to how, for whatever reason, nobody talks about this. Now, what I find interesting is that they act like this is something as if you're talking about, you know, them sombreritos, because ain't nobody about to cancel you. You talk about this, we don't have the power to cancel you. So say whatever it is that you want to say. But you notice that people don't talk about this. So I want to ask you guys that question. Why is it that people don't talk about this?
Known as fancy girls were the daughters of mixed-race slaves and were sold at auction for exorbitant prices. They were then forced into sexual relationships with white plantation owners and their male guests, and their offspring were often sold back into the slave trade. In addition to the fancy trade, there were also reports of forced sexual relationships between white plantation owners and their former female slaves. This was made easier by the fact that many former slaves continued to live and work on the same plantations where they had been enslaved, and were often still subjected to the same abusive treatment. Fact number 10. Slave breeding and sex farms were often defended by slave owners and supporters of slavery. Despite the horrific and exploitative nature of slave breeding and sex farms, many slave owners and supporters of slavery defended the practice as necessary for the economic prosperity of the American South. They argued that the breeding of enslaved people—
I mean, these are good Samaritans we're talking about. These are good Samaritans that we're talking about. Remember that whole thing about good Samaritans? Here they are. Just like how they justify a death today. They justify slavery yesterday. What they're going to justify in 10 to 15 years. Anybody want to find out? I don't.
was an important source of labor for the plantation economy, and that without it, the region would suffer economically. For example, in his 1857 book, The Impending Crisis of the South, Southern writer and politician Hinton Rowan Helper defended the practice of slave breeding as a necessary economic strategy. He wrote that, "The raising of Negroes for the Southern market has been carried on to a considerable extent, and that it has proved to be a
The raising of Negroes." I want you guys to read this white man's words. And then I want you guys to listen to his descendants say that they didn't do anything and they're not a part of anything. And that nothing that this guy did helped them with their prosperity. The raising of Negroes. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? That's something, isn't it?
lucrative and profitable business. Similarly, in a speech delivered in 1850, U.S. Senator James Henry Hammond of South Carolina defended the practice of slave breeding as necessary for the economic success of the southern states. He argued that the breeding of enslaved people was a more cost-effective way of acquiring labor than importing new slaves from Africa or purchasing them from other regions. These justifications—
Real quick, ladies and gentlemen, make sure if you guys haven't smashed that like button, you guys smash that like button. Also, if you guys have not hit that bell, make sure you guys hit that bell and share the stream out. And make sure you guys throw some radiation emoji in the chat for Al McCowan with the $5 super chat. Definitely appreciate it, bro. Al McCowan says, this stream is hard to listen to, yet well needed. I believe that people need to hear this stuff. And people should be happy that they're not these people that didn't have a choice and had to be forced to go through this. At least if you're listening to it, all you're doing is forcing yourself to listen. You know what I'm saying?
For slave breeding and sex farms highlight the deep-seated racism and economic interests that underpin the institution of slavery. Rather than acknowledging the inhumane and exploitative nature of the practice, slave owners and their supporters saw enslaved people solely as a source of labor, without regard for their basic human rights and dignity. Furthermore, these justifications ignore the fact that enslaved people were not merely property or commodities, but were human beings with families, cultures, and histories. By treating enslaved people solely as sources of labor, slave owners and supporters of slavery perpetuated a system of exploitation and dehumanization that continues to have lasting impacts on American society.
Whoa, there goes your answer for how does slavery affect anybody that's alive today. And real quick, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you guys show some love to Fantizzy731 with the $5 super chat. My man Fantizzy says BLR is speaking the truth. Super facts, bro. I'm trying to, at least. Honestly, I want people to consider these things and come up with their own conclusions and be honest with the conclusions that you come up with. Like I always try to tell people, like my content is not telling you who you are. My content is not telling you what to do or what to be. I can't tell anybody that. Anybody that tells you that is fake. They're a liar. That should be an automatic red flag. You know what I'm saying? The only thing that I'm trying to do with you all is to take you down a series of thoughts and see what we come up with. And see if we come up with the same conclusion. Because if you come up with the same conclusion, then the different ways that people come up with that conclusion, it doesn't matter how they get there. The only thing that matters is how people get there. So let's go through all of this and see what the conclusion is. You know what I'm saying? I don't need to try to control your thoughts or control how you think. I'm not out here trying to make a whole bunch of Robb clones and shit like that. Like, I'm not trying to do none of that. You know what I'm saying? What I want to do is I want people to be able to try to logically look at situations and figure out quickly what the best way is to handle them. Like, that's it. No more, no less. Literally, there's nobody that can say that there's anything negative about somebody that's attempting to help you try to think. I'm not trying to form your opinions for you guys. You know what I'm saying? Like, you guys know, everybody's allowed to have their own opinions about everything. Somebody that's trying to form your opinion for you is fake. You know what I'm saying? They're fake. Somebody should only present you the information. I'll tell you guys when I'm giving my opinion. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to force my opinion on you guys. Pay very close attention to people that do that. You will see it. And they try to do it in passive-aggressive ways. You know what I'm saying?
While it may be difficult to confront the reality of what happened on sex farms during slavery, it's important that we acknowledge and remember these atrocities in order to fully understand the impact that slavery has had on American society. The practice of slave breeding was not only inhumane but also dehumaning, as it reduced human beings to nothing more than commodities to be bought, sold, and traded. The evidence of this practice is over. It is important to learn from this dark chapter in history. By acknowledging the deep-seated racism and exploitation that underpinned these practices and working to dismantle the systems of inequality and injustice that continue to affect Black Americans, we can begin to create a more just and equitable society for all. Thanks for...
Yeah, I think the time is over as far as talking about creating anything just and equal and equitable for all. That time is done. There's an expiration date on that kind of nonsense, if you ask me. Now, there's something. Now, again, that's just if you ask me. There's some people that'll say, Rob, Rob, you're a little bit too harsh. Okay, well, maybe I'm a little bit too harsh, but you're not going to change my mind because I'm a little bit too harsh. You know what I'm saying? I feel like there's an expiration date on bullshit. And I think that everybody has used up their expiration date. Slave breeding in the United States. Because the United States is still around today. The United States is still around today. Slave breeding was the practice in slave states of the United States of slave owners to systematically force the reproduction of slaves to increase their profits. Well, it wasn't about racism. It was just about money. Where was the white slaves on the slave farms then? Where was the white slaves on the slave farms? It included coerced sexual relations between male slaves and women or girls, forced pregnancies of female slaves, and favoring women or young girls who could produce a relatively large number of children. The objective was to increase the number of slaves without incurring the cost of purchase and to fill labor shortages caused by the abolition of the Atlantic slave trade. So as you guys can see, this was specifically for specific business objectives. This was done as a result of business needs. Okay. How do you guys feel about that? This was done as a result of business needs. So because the United States is a capitalist state, this was done as a result of business needs. It wasn't that bad, which it wasn't that bad is our new permission to go ahead and get the agenda going for us to reverse the situation. Right? If you guys agree with that, give me a thumbs up. If you guys disagree, give me a thumbs down. The laws that ultimately abolished the Atlantic slave trade came about as a result of efforts of the British abolitionist Christian groups, such as the Society of Friends, known as the Quakers, and evangelicals, led by William Wilberforce, whose efforts through the Committee for Abolition of the Slave Trade led to the passage of the 1807 Slave Trade Act by the British Parliament in 1807. Now, let me ask you guys a question. What group of people in the United States have slave laws tied into two different countries? That's the question. Is that a valid question, guys? I think that's a pretty valid question. And shout out to you guys for hitting that ×3 combo. This led to increased calls for abolition in America, supported by members of the U.S. Congress, both from the North and the South, as well as Thomas Jefferson, who has some black kids of his own. Thomas Jefferson got a whole ass set of baby kids. We got a United States. We got, listen to this. We got a white United States president that legitimately has baby kids running around. As long as we understand that, like, that's what we're working with here. You know what I'm saying? We got a white, quote unquote, founding father of the country who has baby mamas. And they look at Thomas Jefferson like he's something to be esteemed. He's on a $5 bill. This dude exploited black female slaves like a piece of crap. And then they want to try to give him some kind of credit for freeing slaves. That's crazy, right? At the same time that the importation of slaves from Africa was being restricted or eliminated, the United States was undergoing a rapid expansion of cotton, sugarcane, and rice production in the deep South and West. The invention of the cotton gin enabled the profitable cultivation of short staple cotton, which could be produced more widely than other types. This led to the economic prominence of cotton throughout the deep South. Slaves were treated as a commodity by owners and traders alike, and were regarded as the crucial labor for the production of lucrative cash crops that fed the triangular trade. But there's those people aren't owed any money. Those people aren't owed any money, though. Let me ask you guys a question. Out of all of that, how is somebody not owed any money? You know what I'm saying? Out of all of that, how is somebody not owed any money? Can you guys explain that to me? The slaves were managed as chattel assets, similar to farm animals. Now, what Irish slave was managed as a chattel asset? A slave and a chattel asset's not the same thing. A slave is a slave. A chattel asset is a chattel asset. Irish were slaves, according to white people. Never heard a white person say Irish were chattel assets. You think we'll ever hear one say that? Hmm. Slave owners passed laws regulating slavery and the slave trade designed to protect their financial investment. So as long as whatever we do to people, as long as we do it to them in the name of capitalism, and as long as we do it to them in the name of money, it doesn't matter how egregious it is. It doesn't matter how harmful it is. It doesn't matter how amoral it is. It doesn't matter how unethical it is. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is our profits. Would you guys agree? If you guys agree, give me a thumbs up. If you guys disagree, give me a thumbs down. Breeding in response to the end of slave imports. Look at this. The prohibition of the importation of slaves into the United States after 1808 limited the supply of slaves in the United States. This came at a time when the invention of the cotton gin enabled the expansion and cultivation in the uplands of short staple cotton, leading to clearing lands, cultivating cotton through the large areas of the deep South, especially the Black Belt. The demand for labor in the area sharply led to an expansion of the internal slave market. At the time, the Upper South had excess number of slaves because of a shift to mixed crop agriculture, which was less labor intensive than tobacco. To add, the supply of slaveholders looked at the fertility of slave women as part of their productivity and intermittently forced women to have large numbers of children. During this time, the terms breeders and breeding slaves and childbearing women and breeding period and too old to breed became similar. Man, I swear I've heard some people say these things when talking about women in some red pill shit. Everybody should want to embrace villainy, Deneen. Literally everybody should want to do it. As a matter of fact, you shouldn't want to do it. It should just be reflex. But as we know, we all got WS brain damage, so we can't trust our reflexes. You know what I'm saying? Got to check them twice. Even more than that sometimes. Okay. So we got the Wikipedia article here about the slave breeding because it happened to us, not to anybody else. But remember, though, it wasn't that bad. So now, again, if we're only talking about this in terms of what happened to us, it's no more. It's not effective. It's just shame, blame, and explain. We could tell people this a million times. We already know what they're gonna say. Black people deserve reparations. White people's response: we don't even think you deserve oxygen. Look what we did to Jordan Neely. So that's what we're dealing with. So we can talk about it in terms of SBE, or we can talk about it in terms of figuring some shit out. Real quick, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys haven't smashed the like button, please take a moment, smash that like button. Also, if you guys haven't hit the bell, make sure you guys hit that bell icon twice. Share the stream to your social media. Follow me on my social media. Make sure you guys follow my backup channels. I'm telling you, when YouTube takes your stuff down, they take your stuff down and it's gone. And sometimes it don't come back. Sometimes the stuff does not come back on YouTube, y'all. Sometimes that stuff is just gone. You know what I'm saying? It's just a rizap. Genetic impact of African slave trade revealed in DNA study. What do you think this study revealed? A major DNA study has shed new light on the fate of millions of Africans who were traded as slaves to the Americas between the 16th and 19th centuries. More than 50,000 people took part in the study, which was able to identify more details of the genetic impact the trade has had on present-day populations in the Americas. It lays the bare consequence of rape, maltreatment, disease, and racism. But this is woke. Because we're going to deter any conversation away from any of this. Okay? More than 2.5 million Africans were traded between 1515 and the mid-19th century. Some 2 million of the enslaved men, women, and children died en route to the Americas. The DNA study was led by consumer genetics company 23andMe and included 30,000 people of African ancestry on both sides of the Atlantic. The following were published in the American Journal of Human Genetics. Now, I don't know if I would necessarily trust 23andMe, but it would be a decent reference point. You know what I'm saying? It'd be a decent reference point. Stephen Michelotti, a population geneticist at 23andMe, told AFP news agency that the aim was to compare the genetic results with the manifest of the slave ships to see how they agreed and how they disagree. So now that's interesting because these people know exactly where the slave manifests are. And I told you guys that, remember? You guys remember that? While much of their findings agreed with historical documentation about where people were taken from in Africa and where they were enslaved in the Americas, in some cases, we see that they disagree quite strikingly, he added. So it looks like they got some kind of video here. Let's take a look at this real quick. Let's see something.
What you see are the faces of our ancestors who were caught within slavery. I'm Kwame Akoto-Bamfo. I'm an artist, educator, and cultural activist. I'm trying to portray what our ancestors went through, trying to immerse in the enslavement experience, all cut across 400 years. So we have various narratives, we have various people from different tribes, we have various states in which they were before they were captured. There are those who were prisoners of war, there are those who were just purely kidnapped, there were those who were coerced, there are those who were clueless as to what was really happening. There are just so many narratives, and it's not a single story, and hence the decision to make it on this scale, so that even though we cannot create as many sculptures as our ancestors who we lost, we will have clear representation of what really happened. We are using human heads because the art itself is paying homage to.
So now just remember, they said, white people said that this is all good. It's all okay. It's all fair game. People should be motivated.
Our ancient practice, Akan practice of creating portraits of the dead. Walking through the sculptures all come with a series of feelings. Whilst at one point I'm happy that I am able to tell the story, the moment when you place a head amongst a lot, it's very significant of one other person being captured. I want the installation to be that point of reference for us to realize how great we were, what went wrong, and the possibility of us getting our greatness back.
The first thing that people got to do in order to get their greatness back is to realize that things happened. Deal with those things that happen, and then start making things that you want to happen. Not based on what somebody else does. How many people have like a good self-perception of yourself? You know what I'm saying? Like, people say it all the time, you know what I'm saying? Like, all this facetious nonsense. But when it comes down to actuality, how many people actually for real feel good about themselves? If you don't, then probably what you should be doing is taking actions to change your self-image for yourself, so you have a higher standard and a higher expectation, and you see yourself as great. So that's what you require of yourself all the time. That's the whole reason why the media images are constantly bombarding you with the worst possible images and looks of anybody that's like us that we can possibly see. That's the whole point. So anytime anybody gets up on a camera or gets up in front of a microphone and they're the "I got negative shit to say about black people" expert, you already know somebody that's somebody that's brain dead. They're lost. They're not even worth the effort of even trying to do anything, communicate, or anything. Just act like they're invisible unless they try to hurt you. It's not even worth a conversation. It's not even worth even being bothered with. So now here it says the study found in line with the major slave route that most Americans of African descent have roots in the territories now located in Angola and the Democratic Republic of Congo. What was surprising was the overrepresentation of Nigerian ancestry in the U.S. and Latin American when compared with the record number of enslaved people from that region. Particularly, researchers say that this can be explained by intercontinental trade that occurred primarily between 1619 and 1807. Okay. So now here it says they believed enslaved Nigerians were transported from the British Caribbean to other areas, presumably to maintain the slave economy as the transatlantic slave trade was increasingly prohibited. You know what I'm saying? Likewise, the researchers were surprised to find an underrepresentation from Senegal and Gambia, one of the first regions where slaves were deported. Researchers put this down to two grim factors. Many were sent in to work rice plantations where malaria and other dangerous conditions were rampant, and in later years, larger numbers of children were sent, many of whom did not survive the crossing. In another gruesome discovery, the study found that the treatment of the enslaved women across the Americas had an impact on the modern gene pool. How many people knew that? Why would we not assume that, though? You know what I'm saying? Because people will sit out here and just believe anything these clowns tell them to. Because they just want to be loved so bad. I'd rather actually be hated. Researchers said a strong bias toward African female contributions in the gene pool. Look at this. Researchers said there's a strong bias toward African female contributions in the gene pool, even though the majority of slaves were male, could be attributed to the rape of enslaved African women by slave owners and other sexual exploitation. Now, I wonder if that has anything to do with the damn gender war or not. I wonder if that has anything to do with issues that black men and black women have with each other or not. What do you guys think? What are the results of what these gene patterns say? Any ideas? In Latin America, up to 17 African women for every African man contributed to the gene pool. In Latin America, up to 17 African women for every African man contributed to the gene pool. Researchers put this down in part to a policy of breakamiento, racial whitening, in a number of countries which actively encourage the immigration of European men with the intention to dilute African ancestry through reproduction. There's never been, and I repeat, like I always repeat, there's never been a replacement theory for white people. It's always been us that the entire world has teamed up with each other to try to replace. It has never been anybody else. And now it's down to the small amount of FBAs. Because Africans were helping them. They sitting there talking about replacement theory and shit when these motherfuckers are actually doing it. Tucker Carlson sitting there outraged, and one of his distant ancestors created a whole new race of Spanish-speaking Asian people somewhere. I mean, this is the truth. This is one of the reasons why I don't want you talking about it. Who cares how many times you can repeat woke? How many times can you repeat this and say that your family didn't have anything to do about it? Although the bias in British colonized America was just 2 African women to 1 African man, it was no less exploitive. The study highlighted the practice of coercing enslaved people to having children as a means of maintaining the enslaved workforce nearing the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade. So now what I want you guys to answer me about is, did these breeding farms, do those have anything to do with how we are currently today? That's what I need to know the answer to. Shout out to my man Rogish the Billmonger. What's up with it, bro? Make sure you throw your channel link in the chat so people can go check you out. That's what I'm trying to figure out, y'all. In the U.S., women were often promised freedom in return for reproducing, and racist policies opposed the mixing of different races, researchers noted. So, like, you could only race mix if you were white in order to lighten the race. You know what I'm saying? If you were black and you had some kind of mixed race relationship, it's looked at as you're darkening the race, and that would be illegal. This is something that white people came up with, something that white people don't want to be accountable for, something that white people need to deal with. What did Marianne Williamson think about this? Is this anti-Semitic too? That's the question. That is the question, ladies and gentlemen. So now they go down here and talk about some Black Lives Matter movement, blah, blah, blah. We all know about that. And then they talk about removing statues, which that's not helping anybody do anything. But what this article did help is that this article did substantiate my claim. This article absolutely helped substantiate my claim. But remember, the key thing about all of this is that it wasn't that bad, and that other groups of people invite us to do it to them, since it wasn't that bad. That's the key takeaway. Okay. So now this is a paper here, The American Slave Coast, A History of the Slave Breeding Industry. See that? A History of the Slave Breeding Industry by Ned and Constance Sublett, Chicago. The book is $35 for anybody that's interested. This is what it's about. It's about slave breeding as the focus of this history of the United States from colonial times to the Civil War. The expansion of cotton cultivation and the closing of the international slave trade increased the demand for slaves in the Southwest and increased slave prices throughout the South. According to Ned and Constance Sublett, the authors of The American Slave Coast, slave holders in the Chesapeake responded to these higher prices by breeding and selling slaves to traders for southern markets. By breeding them. They had human breeding farms. They had human breeding farms. Prohibiting the African slave trade protected the market so that a new class of American traders could come forward, supplied with homegrown captives born into slavery on the Virginia and Maryland farms, which you guys know the Virginia and Maryland colonies were the first, those were the first established settlements. Predecessors to the United States. The conditions were right for a massive, quote unquote, forced migration of enslaved Chesapeake laborers down south, and it did not have to be a one-time drain. Continuing domestic slave breeding industry was now possible. Okay, so this is long. This is very long, but this goes into detail and talks about a lot of this stuff. Okay. That goes into a lot of the detail and it talks about this stuff. Okay. So now my question for you guys, and I want you guys to leave the answer after the stream, is Do you now agree that we've been genetically engineered? Do you agree with other people that this quote unquote wasn't so bad? And my question is, if you agree that it wasn't so bad, what's the plan to stop with the political shame, blame, and explain and actually start reversing the trend, actually reversing it to where they're on the same end of things as we are? Not equity. That's the question. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you hit the bell icon twice, smash the like button, share this video out to all of your followers, and I will catch you all on the next video. All right? Peace.